years because of the higher energy cost and also higher prices for the machineries in the fields. And what I hear from farmers is that now with hike in the rice prices, they have finally reached the break-even point. So if the price goes down, making a rice will not be profitable again. So from the economics perspective, I think this high cost will keep the rice price higher compared to the last years.
So what does Japan's rice crisis say about its economy? That the impact on it when production control policies don't deliver is far-reaching. This edition of The Inquiry was presented by me, Charmaine Cozier. The producer was Louise Clark, researcher Katie Morgan, editor Tara McDermott, and technical producer Richard Hannaford.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here on CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Glad to be back in our CBC studios with you after a day out in Lac du Bonnet. Thanks so much for joining us on Information Radio, your morning show. We're on till 8:37 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app, or on YouTube, where I'm waving hello. It's 3 minutes to 6 o'clock. Let's say good morning to the team. Corey Funk's also back. He'll be on air covering the commute. And also Abby Adeyemi is here, our senior tech behind the controls. And also Abby covers the weather. Mr. Brad Lilly saying hello, our producer on your YouTube stream of the show, and Sierra Sanders is our show director this morning, also saying hello if you're watching us. It's 3 minutes, as mentioned, to 6 o'clock. We have air quality statements in effect because of the fires in the province. They do include Bissett, Victoria Beach, Nopaming, Pinawa, around Barons River and Little Grand, as well up around Flintflon, where things have been developing, Norway House, Tuduli Lake, and Gillam. In Winnipeg, it's going to be hazy, a high of 27 degrees, and through that haze, a little bit of a mix of sun and cloud. Let's go to Heather Wells now to find out the latest on what we understand about news that's developing today. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, two men convicted of human smuggling in a case where a family of four from India died trying to cross the border in 2022 are expected to learn their fates today. Steve Shand of Florida and Indian national Harsh Kumar Patel were convicted by a Minnesota jury in November. Prosecutors are asking Shand to get more than 10 years in prison. They recommend Patel receive a sentence of more than 19 years. So we'll hear more about that case. On to another case. A legal expert says a ruling in the Peter Nygard case underscores competing interests in the justice system. Yesterday, a judge ruled there had been political interference by Calvin Gertson, the province's attorney general, in 2022 when he asked for a second opinion of an initial decision to not charge the former fashion mogul in Manitoba. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, let's get into the program today. As I mentioned, Corey is working hard right now, actually, out in our news center to try to reach someone up around Flintflon. So if you're up and listening this morning, you can always reach out to us. I'll give you the traffic line, 788-3093, if you want to reach us live. We're just trying to get a sense of what's developing when it comes to fires and evacuations. In addition, we'll mention that in the first hour of the show, we're going to hear how the Sane River is the backdrop for a lesson in Métis and Michif and Winnipeg history. So that's straight ahead on the show. Right now, though, it's time for World Report at 6.
Today on Q. The French duo Justice changed the face of electronic music when they released their debut album back in 2007. The two members of the band will be here to talk to you about their latest record and working with The Weeknd, which is different than working for The Weeknd.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The challenges before the Canadian government are significant. Mark Carney's plan to address them now laid out by the speech from the throne. But this time, his time to take action is limited. And the Prime Minister's agenda is packed, starting with a Liberal caucus meeting this morning and his first question period in the House of Commons this afternoon. Let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, Parliament has urgent business it needs to get done. Walk us through it.
That's right, Marcia, because the House hasn't met since December. When MPs reconvened after the throne speech yesterday, the government's spending estimates were immediately tabled. House Leader Stephen McKinnon laid out a plan for debating and then voting to authorize those so federal funding is properly scrutinized again. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, true to his word, introduced the personal income tax cut that Liberals campaigned on. MPs will vote to authorize that before the summer. But for this first week, the House is going to be debating the priorities that the government laid out in yesterday's throne speech. And surprise, Andrew Scheer, who now serves as opposition leader, wasn't impressed.
It's not good enough to say what you intend to do. You have to provide some kind of a roadmap to get there.
Look, no one expects the Conservatives to support the throne speech when it comes to a vote a week from today. But the Liberals are expected to find the few additional votes they need elsewhere to establish the confidence of the House and then get down to governing again.
So when Mark Carney faces his first question period this afternoon, what will you be looking for?
Well, how this House rookie performs in his debut, of course. But look, some of the most urgent issues he's likely to be grilled on unfold away from Parliament. If you think about the resource development and trade infrastructure demands that he's going to be discussing with the premiers next week, the ongoing tariff talks with Washington, something the government would love to make progress on so it isn't hanging over the G7 summit in Kananaskis in a few short weeks, and the shift to massive defense spending, giving Canada more to show for itself with NATO partners at the end of June. These are all matters that Carney has to nail down elsewhere, then bring back to Parliament to authorize, perhaps in the form of a fall budget.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. The Conservative Party of Canada is entering this session of Parliament with more seats in Newfoundland and Labrador. The party won 3 of the province's 7 seats. That is the most it has won in nearly 20 years. The CBC's Heather Gillis takes a look at what led to the Conservatives' gains.
On election night, the Conservatives won 2 decisive victories in Newfoundland and Labrador. Clifford Small in central Newfoundland and Carol Anstey in Long Range Mountains. After a tight race and a recount in Terra Nova the Peninsula's Jonathan Rowe picked up a 3rd seat for the party. Former Conservative MP and now Senator Fabian Manning says the cost of living and affordability were big issues driving voters.
And, over the past number of years, things have been pretty rough on people. So I think that certainly played a very large part in, the election and why we end up with 3 seats.
It's the first time since 2006, nearly 20 years, that the Conservatives have won this many seats in the province.
Do not let Stephen Harper turn your focus.
A result not seen since former Premier Danny Williams' anything but Conservative campaign took hold, freezing out Conservatives in 2008, again in 2015. Meanwhile, political scientist Alex Marlin says the party's gains come from a deepening rural-urban divide.
Think about the carbon tax. Think about climate change. The kinds of things that a lot of people in urban centers and, certainly out of Toronto and out of Ottawa and Montreal and other places that they were pushing was something that really alienated a lot of people in rural Canada, including rural Newfoundland and Labrador.
Meanwhile, Manning says it's a good thing to have a better balance between the number of Conservative and Liberal MPs in the province. And Marland is wondering if a similar rural-urban divide will emerge during the upcoming provincial election. Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
Globally, the last 10 years were the hottest ever measured, and the World Meteorological Organization says the next 5 years could be even hotter. It says there is an 80% chance at least one of the next 5 years will exceed 2024 as the warmest on record. Liz Bentley is the chief executive of the Royal Meteorological Society. She told the BBC the effects could be devastating.
Even with the current warming that we've seen, we're getting more frequent and intense heat waves, more extreme rainfall events, more devastating droughts. We will see all of those being exacerbated as the global temperatures continue to rise.
The annual climate update says there is a 70% chance that on average, the next 5 years will be warmer by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. That puts the world dangerously close to breaking the Paris Agreement target. The international agreement aims to limit rising global temperatures caused by the burning of fossil fuels. A longtime fugitive is scheduled to appear in an Ontario court this morning. Patrick Lutz Jr. evaded U.S. authorities for more than 2 decades. A CBC News investigation recently revealed he spent years living out in the open in Toronto. As Thomas Daigle reports, he now faces extradition on charges of manslaughter.
It's been a roller coaster of emotions.
Out of the blue last spring, Jorge Leon says he received an anonymous message that would give hope to his family in Florida for the first time in years.
We're finally getting some type of justice, and it's because of this person.
A tipster claimed they'd tracked down the alleged drunk driver accused of killing Leon's teenage cousin Nancy Lopez and her boyfriend in 1998. Far from the crash site in Orlando, fugitive Patrick Lutz Jr. had been living a double life in Ontario. The tipster said they'd used facial recognition and social media clues to track Lutz to Toronto, handing the details to authorities and leading to Lutz's arrest earlier this year. Alberto Lopez was the victim's older brother.
I was so happy because I was waiting long time.
Lutz skipped a court hearing more than 21 years ago and vanished. A CBC News investigation found since then he worked as an online psychic and hosted a monthly trivia night at a Toronto bar, all while evading U.S. authorities. Mark Lomax is a former state trooper.
Usually individuals like that will mess up or get into the system way before 21 years.
Nancy Lopez's loved ones say they look forward to seeing Lutz extradited to Florida so they can face him in court. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
2 men convicted in a smuggling case are expected to be sentenced in Minnesota today. Their case involved the deaths of a family of 4 from India. The family was found frozen to death in a Manitoba field in 2022. The family was trying to walk across the border into the U.S. The 2 men were convicted for being part of a smuggling ring. U.S. prosecutors are asking for nearly 20 years for the alleged leader and nearly 11 years for the driver who was supposed to pick up the family. U.S. embassies around the world have been ordered to stop processing new visas for foreign students. It's part of U.S. President Donald Trump's crackdown on certain universities and colleges. But some critics say it is just another attack on academic freedom. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, what can you tell us?
Yeah, according to diplomatic cables seen by several media outlets here, the order was signed by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Tuesday, telling U.S. consulates and embassies to pause all foreign student applications until further guidance. Now, the administration believes foreign students are mostly to blame for the mass protests on university campuses, and it blames the elite liberal universities, especially Harvard, for allowing anti-Semitism to flourish. Now, this order comes days after a judge temporarily paused President Trump's order to block Harvard from accepting international students. Harvard professor Mark Weisskopf says this is an act of retaliation, a personal vendetta by the president.
It literally hurts hundreds of millions of Americans who benefit from serious research in this country and people around the world who benefit from the work that we do.
Now, universities rely heavily on foreign students' tuition for its finances, so this move could have a huge impact on its bottom lines.
Now, another hurdle for international students is this newly proposed plan to screen their social media. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so the State Department could also review the social media history of all foreign student applications. Many State Department officials have reportedly complained privately that the language of what's acceptable of free speech or not is vague at best. One questioned if posting a Palestinian flag on Instagram is grounds for extra scrutiny. So clearly this would have a tremendous impact on universities should this order be enacted permanently.
Thank you, Richard.
Anytime.
That is the CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. That is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg. Nice to be back here after a trip to Lac du Bonnet yesterday to cover what's happening in the wildfire zones. Of course, that fire now is considered under control, but there's a fire in Flintflon that we understand is considered out of control this morning. And as of last night, there was a pre-alert evacuation notice listed. So if you're in the Flintflon area and you want to reach out to us this morning, I just posted on Facebook. A lot of people communicate that way. You can also reach the show at 788-3093. This is CBC's Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Well, in addition to covering what's going on in the news and in the fires, this hour on the program, we're going to take you out onto the water. That's because we're going to hear how the Sane River is the backdrop for a lesson in Métis and Michif and Winnipeg history. So stay tuned for that and to hear how you can take part in what we're talking about. And as the Carney government leans into a commitment to eliminate interprovincial trade barriers by Canada Day, we'll talk to an economist about whether or not that goal is realistic. And we've done a lot of stories here at CBC recently about what would that mean for Manitoba? And we've heard from some businesses that say it could be a game changer and others that say actually there's still other layers of regulation that won't make it that easy to trade their goods across those provincial lines. So we're going to have that interview this hour and try to get some more detail. Right now, though, speaking of news, let's go to Heather Wells at 6:11 a.m. on your Wednesday morning and find out what is making news with the headlines.
Good morning. Well, the cousin of one of 4 vulnerable First Nations women killed by a convicted serial killer says there still aren't enough safe spaces in Winnipeg for vulnerable women. Melissa Robinson wants to see emergency shelters exclusively for women in several neighborhoods. And Homelessness Winnipeg says there are women-only shelters focusing on the safety and support for those who are fleeing violence. Several investors who say they were defrauded out of tens of thousands of dollars hope to see some justice today. The criminal fraud trial of Jawad Rathor and Vince Petroza, who are principals in Fortress Real Developments, receives a decision in their trial by judge alone. The men are on trial over alleged syndicated mortgage fraud related to Sky City condo development in Winnipeg, and you'll know that condo development was never built. So we'll hear more on those stories and others in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's happening in the weather forecast. Good morning, Abby Adiyemi.
Good morning, Marcy.
I have to say, I came here back to Winnipeg today. I washed all my stuff out smelling like smoke because, as you can imagine, being right in the heart of the aftermath of Lac du Bonnet. And I'm saddened to see this, what's still developing around the province. We have a whole bunch of air quality statements issued, right?
Yes, true. And more. We have warm temperatures, hazy skies. That's stretching across most of the province this morning, tracking it from the south right up into the north. We still have smoke from the fires affecting the air quality in a lot of places, hence this special air quality statement, which is in effect. And this smoke is going to be making it harder for people in the Flintflon area, stretching into Thompson. Then you would notice it in the White Shell all the way down to Burns Rivers. You'll be noticing smoke in the air in that area. And since the winds are light, the smoke might be lingering around for a while, especially in the southeastern parts of the province. So it's a good idea to limit your outdoor time if you have issues when it comes to smoke as it affects you. But for Winnipeg at this time, a mild morning, 13 degrees. It's cloudy outside as if the sun is trying to wake up. Today we're looking for a mix of sun and clouds, some haze hanging in the air. It's going to warm up nicely to 27 degrees later. It should feel quite comfortable throughout the day, and the winds will stay light mainly from the north. Tonight we'll see mostly partly cloudy conditions that will continue. Now across board down south, Gimli, Brandon, all the way down to Dauphin, we're seeing temperatures hover between 12 and 14 degrees, but up north, that's we're talking about the Par, Flintflon, Thompson into Churchill. That's where we have that smoke in the air with warm weather, and we're seeing temperatures already in the 20s in the northern part of the province this morning. Highs will be getting close to 29 degrees. Right now, Winnipeg, we're at 13, warming up to 27.
I'm trying not to be elated here in the city of Winnipeg because, man, we need rain.
We do need rain.
All right, let's talk about where else those fires are out of control. So the Flintflon fire, the White Shell fire, the Nopaming Bird River fire, there's a Cross Lake fire, all listed as out of control this morning. And so just mentioning that, and if you're in your local areas, you likely know, but check your rural RM pages for more details. Corey is actually working kind of a different shift today. So Corey's actually on the phone. He's finding out what's happening, the latest in the fire zones, and he's going to be popping in and out with traffic. I'm just going to cover for him here because he's busy in our news center. So I will tell you that the Louise Bridge remains closed. That was supposed to actually be reopened after the weekend, but that does remain closed. Otherwise, you should pretty much have a beautiful drive around. Check 511 because of the fires. We do have highways that are closed in different areas of the province, so check before you go. And the number to update us is 788-3093. Well, up first on the show, the Sane River in Winnipeg weaves through Saint Vital and Saint Boniface, and there's history behind the river, and it's rooted with the Métis. The Rendezvous Rivière Seine event is inviting people to make their way down the river and learn all about it in a really cool way. So the award for early morning riser and first guest of the show goes to David Daniluk, who's in studio. He's the volunteer co-chair of the event, which is coming up, and he's been paddling down the Seine since he was a kid. Nice to see you.
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having us.
So how old were you when you first took a first paddle down the Seine?
I think it was about 13,
Wow.
13, 14. Yeah.
What do you love about being on the water in this particular body of water?
Well, the Sane River meanders so much that you actually get lost. You have no way of really orienting yourself within the city because it's 26 kilometers long, which is longer than the Assiniboine. And so that's a lot of shoreline, a lot of different properties, and different, like 3 golf courses, forests. So it's a real escape from the city in the city.
What got you interested in paddling, back when you were a kid?
Scouting. I went on a canoe trip when I was 12 with up in Thompson, and actually 40 years ago. And we're having a reunion trip up in Thompson in the same river system. But that was really where I realized, this is a really great way to travel along the water and see way more, or access more wilderness.
Mm-hmm. Especially, as you said, because you kind of get lost in those curves. So you really do feel like you've got this little cocoon of greenery around you when you're on the water, right?
Yeah, it's like Tom Sawyer. I see adults of all ages, and they're like little kids. Did you see that big turtle? Oh my gosh, there's this huge owl on the tree. The excitement is like you're 12 years old again.
And you're going to share this with people because that's part of what the event is about next weekend. Tell us a bit about what's happening at it.
Yeah, this is such a unique event. It's bilingual. It's put on or hosted by the Métis Historical Society, or the Société Historique Métis, and it's a paddle and a party. We paddle from 5 different locations along the Sane River, so it could be as far as 17 kilometers. So you start earlier in the day for that one.
Okay.
And then there's 5 different locations as far as South Glen Bridge, John Bruce Park, a pond named Panko Pond near Niagara Golf Course, Morier Park off of Egerton, Happy Land Park, and then we all rendezvous at the end at the Gabourey-Lagimodière Park, just by Provencher Bridge, which is the original homestead of the Métis of the Luriel family.
So it's a bit about history, it's a bit about paddling, it's a lot about community. And I understand, even just to look at the paddling aspect of it, you've included paddle boarders this year, is that right, to kind of make it more inclusive?
Yeah, so as you know, canoeing started primarily accessible for canoes, then kayaks just exploded. And more recently, paddle boarders have become a much more significant paddle community. So we have a shorter distance so that it's not as grueling for paddling while you stand up, which is real exercise compared to sitting in a canoe. Yeah,
you feel it in your abs, right? The first time you
that's
try
athletic.
It, you're like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah.
This looks so peaceful until my abs started burning. There's also going to be storytellers, I understand, along the way at checkpoints on the route. So what kinds of stories and who's going to be sharing?
Well, it's going to be young, aspiring actors, Métis youths, I think.
Fun.
And I've got the list of the...
is it characters that they'll be playing, I understand?
Yeah, one will be a Métis woman whose name is Geneviève Dice.
Okay.
One will be Luriel's father, Luriel Père, who had a water mill on the Sane River for years. The stones from there are in front of the St. Boniface Museum, the millstones, and a Desmerons soldier's wife.
Tell me a bit about why you think it's important to share the history of the land, but also the river and the Métis people in this kind of a way.
Yeah, they're so connected. The Métis, the birth of the Métis Nation on the banks of the Red and the Sane River, and the fact that these francophone Métis communities have remained and are still very much anchored to this area, and all of the different locations along the Sane River that have had significant Métis heritage. For instance, Luriel's house, Maison Luriel, the National Historic Site, was located on the banks of the Sane River and was moved to where it is now. So the Sane River and the St. Boniface, St. Vital community, the culture they're inseparable. Yeah.
It can teach us a lot about our city, about the city of Winnipeg.
Yeah, so imagine the Sane River, you really travel through the emergence of the city of Winnipeg as a city. There's very small little neighborhoods. There's forests that have been untouched, and then there's industrial, commercial, recreational golf courses. It shows you a real urban perspective that you can't see by bike or by hiking. It's continuous. You're seated on the surface of the water, passing by kilometers of shoreline with wildlife, a dozen parks. It's really an impressive greenway.
I think you're going to have beautiful weather for this. We have, hopefully, if the long-range forecasts hold, because it's coming up on June 7th. How many people are you expecting, and is there a cap if people are listening and they're interested?
Well, the Sane River is available to paddle anytime, but it's really fun when you have dozens and dozens of boaters around you. So there should be about 150 or more paddlers, and then if that's one per kayak or two per canoe, paddleboarders. So we have a limit that's just more for capacity.
Of course,
we have porta potties, we have shuttle buses that bring people back to their cars.
So sign up early.
Yeah, sign up now, and we have like lunches included and all that sort of stuff, so we can have logistics planned. But we think about 200 would be where we'd be bursting. We might be very full.
Amazing. A last question here. What about people bringing equipment, and what kind of fitness level do you think that they should have? Because people sometimes get nervous and they say, I'd like to go, but I don't think I can do it.
Well, it's not a difficult river, but it is technical because it takes time to do all the meanders. And there's a few tight spots where there's branches or some faster water.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, bring your boat or kayak. Rent a boat or kayak from our partners at Wilderness Supply and at Winnipeg Canoe and Kayak Rentals. And then we have a boat check where you can leave your boats and we look after them while you enjoy the festive part with our musicians, Andrea Turen, our draw for our prizes.
The party part.
Yeah, and then you can take the shuttles back to your boats or your cars, return, get your boats, and you're home early. So registration's online. It's open now, and it's a fundraiser, right? So the Société is fundraising for bursaries for Métis youth to continue in their studies.
Amazing. A great cause, lovely sounding event. Thank you so much for coming in and telling us about it.
Thank you.
That is David Danilek, the volunteer co-chair of the Rendezvous Rivière Seine. The Rendezvous Rivière Seine event is on June 7th. So that is already next Saturday, if you can imagine that, right? A week from Saturday. So June 7th. If you want to register, the website that you need to go to learn more and read more and sign up is fetjockey.com. Fetjockey.com is FETEJOCKEY.com.
Breaking tonight. Every day. The tariffs are very good. They're very powerful.
Canadians are always ready when someone else drops the gloves.
We bring context to chaos.
What are the consequences of this action? We must retaliate.
In our own backyard.
Come on. Plane crash.
And beyond our borders.
It's the scene of an airstrike.
You're gambling with World War III.
Negotiations are ongoing.
From the source you can trust.
It's time to dig deeper into the story.
The National, Canada's newscast. Tonight on CBC.
Time right now is 6:23 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on that app or on YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks so much for joining us this morning on Information Radio, your morning show. It's mostly cloudy in the city of Winnipeg. It's 13. Brandon, sunny and 5. If you're in Thompson this morning, it's cloudy and 14. Winnipeg's the high is 27, but it's going to be hazy. And through that haze, you'll see some sun and cloud. And of course, a lot of this coming from the wildfires that are burning in the province. An air quality statement's been issued for around Barons River, around Flintflon, Gillam, Shamattawa, and Churchill, and for Bissett, Victoria Beach, and of course through still the Lac de Bonnie and Pinawa area there. Well, next on the show, let's go to national news and talk about what international trade could look like. King Charles delivering yesterday's speech from the throne in Parliament, and in it, Prime Minister Mark Carney's government outlined priorities, particularly when it comes to the economy. And so the speech reiterated Carney's goal of removing federal barriers to internal trade between provinces by July 1st, Canada Day. That's coming up fast. Pal Pujulis is here to talk about it. He's an associate professor of economics at McMaster University. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
What does the federal government actually have capacity to change here? What's the reality of this?
So there are two things that the federal government can do. The first one is to remove Article 8 in the Canada Free Trade Agreement. And the second part that the federal government can do is to wrestle all the provincial governments with funding to remove all the barriers that each province is putting against other provinces.
Why do they need funding? Like, give us a practical example of how that's going to help remove barriers.
So suppose that there are infrastructure projects. Every province needs more infrastructure, and the federal government is always putting money on the table. The federal government can say that it's going to prioritize infrastructure in provinces that recognize all the legality in other provinces. Therefore, the provinces that decide that they want to be part of a one united Canada are going to have priority in the list. That would be a very easy way to go.
If we're rethinking the current model, what are some of the biggest barriers that you would like to see movement on first?
So the one that would have quite an impact directly would be if all the different provinces agreed to allow and recognize all the regulations that all the other provinces have in terms of like labor mobility, in terms of transportation equipment and things like that. Another one that would be great for those that like liquor would be to remove all the power that each different province has in not allowing its own citizens to buy liquor from other provinces freely. Another one that would be great is if the banking system was unified. As you know, we have 6 big banks in Canada, and then we have a bunch of credit unions. Each credit union is simply regulated provincially, and the banks are operating nationally, and as a result, it's creating an asymmetry whereby I cannot have access to the banking services from credit unions in Manitoba just because I'm in Ontario. Removing all those barriers would be quite a big move.
Now, there's some problems with interprovincial trade. I know that our premier and the premier of Ontario got together, and there was a story about, them starting this relationship and, to also, get ahead of what's happening nationally. So they signed a memorandum of understanding, the provinces, Manitoba and Ontario, to already increase interprovincial trade. So that happened already May 14th. So this is already in place. But we have, I know, like a brewery owner, for example, that spoke to CBC that it still kind of doesn't help because of the way that liquor is sold in Ontario, that he can't get his stuff into the stores. So I guess there's a lot of things that have to be done at that that secondary level as well, correct?
That is correct. So it's very good to see that there is a political will, or at least that politicians are claiming that they have a will. But it's more important when that will actually transforms in actual changes in the legislation that allow for a one market economy in Canada and not 13 different ones.
I suspect one of the sticking points is going to be who decides what the rules are for that one market economy, because the provinces have been doing it so differently. How hard do you think it's going to be to get everyone on the same page here, especially by July 1st?
I think that's a little bit optimistic, and I hope that they can deliver, frankly. The main issue here is lobbying, right? So there is a reason always why each province is doing these protectionist measures against the producers in other provinces, and it's because there are some important lobbying groups that are going and they are making the governments to enact laws that are a little bit harmful for everyone and very, very enriching for a small minority. And we as citizens have to be vigilant of that, and we have to be ready to be on the phones and call our MPs and our MPPs and tell them that we do not want to tolerate any more barriers against other fellow Canadians.
If this does, work, just looking at the bright side of this, down the line, what kind of an impact could this be on our Canadian economy, do you think?
According to my own work, the overall cost of all the mess that President Trump is doing against Canadian economy is about 2% of GDP. If we are able to unify the Canadian economy, that's going to boost Canadian GDP by about 4%. So I would say it's twice as positive as bad as what Trump is doing.
Thank you very much for being with us to walk us through it, pal.
Thank you.
That is Pal Pajulis, an associate professor of economics at McMaster University. You're with CBC's Information Radio. Business news coming up. Still ahead in the throne speech. We're going to continue talking about another aspect. We're going to talk more about some of the other aspects of the throne speech with Phil Demont. He has our business report after the news. Also, he's going to talk about some troubling signs for our economy this morning, including a report out that says more Canadians are having trouble meeting their debt payments. So big problems there. That's according to some figures out of Equifax Canada. Phil Demont will be here right after 6:30 to tell us more about it. Stay with us.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it's 13 degrees. Get set to heat up. Our temperature begins that climb starting today. 27 and hazy in Winnipeg today, even hotter tomorrow. Well, people are lined up outside MPI this morning on Bison Drive, and that lineup is growing. CBC's Megan Ketchison is there right now. Megan?
Well, here they've got their coffee, they've got their chairs, they got blankets. Some people have been lined up here in front of the MPI office on Bison Drive since 5 o'clock this morning, and it's all up to get into the very limited spots for the Driver's Ed program. And this is the program where kids can learn how to drive. So they said that there's such limited spots and it's so difficult to get into the program. That's why they wanted to line up. The doors open at 7:30, and they're all hoping to get a spot. There's about 40 people now lined up in front of this office. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC News.
Thanks so much, Megan. Well, people in Flintflon are on evacuation alert as fire burning in Creighton, Saskatchewan crossed the Manitoba border. The northern city says that wildfire started in a landfill in Creighton. The alert, it says, was issued because of dry conditions and proximity to the fire. In a statement posted on social media last night, Flintflon officials asked people to prepare emergency kits and to make sure their vehicles are fully fueled and travel ready. 18 active wildfires are burning across Manitoba, according to the most recent report from the province. 3 years after convicted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky targeted 4 First Nations women, the cousin of one of his victims says there still are not enough safe spaces for vulnerable women in Winnipeg. Alana Cole reports.
Hello, someone in here?
Inside a garage, Morgan's Warriors look for anyone who needs help. Melissa Robinson co-founded the outreach group, named for her cousin Morgan Harris, one of convicted killer Jeremy Skibitsky's victims. Robinson wants to see emergency shelters exclusively for women.
Put one in the core area, put one here in the north end, put one, maybe in the West Broadway area, so you kind of have them spaced out.
And Homelessness Winnipeg says there are women-only shelters focusing on people fleeing violence, and several emergency shelters have areas reserved for women. Bernadette Smith is Manitoba's Minister of Housing, Addictions and Homelessness.
We heard loud and clear through our winter response table that included a lot of women that were in encampments, that were living in shelters. They told us loud and clear that they need housing specific for women. So that's exactly what we're doing.
Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
2 men convicted of human smuggling in a case in 2022 are expected to learn their fates this afternoon. CBC's Caitlin Garlock is in Fergus Falls, Minnesota.
Steve Shand of Florida and Indian national Harsh Kumar Patel were convicted by a Minnesota jury in November. Their convictions came almost 3 years after Jagdish and Vaishali Patel and their 2 kids, 11-year-old Vihangi and 3-year-old Dharmik, were found frozen in Manitoba, a few meters away from the U.S. border in January 2022. Shand was arrested near the border around the same time the Patel family died, with other Indian nationals in the van he was driving. Prosecutors have asked he get over 10 years in prison, saying he knew how dangerous the cold weather could be. Meanwhile, Harsh Kumar Patel, no relation to the Patel family, was arrested in Chicago last year and accused of coordinating the smuggling and hiring Shand. For him, prosecutors have recommended a prison sentence of more than 19 years. Lawyers for both Shand and Patel have asked for lower sentences than what prosecutors are seeking. Caitlin Gowerluck, CBC News, Fergus Falls, Minnesota.
Several investors who say they were defrauded out of tens of thousands of dollars hope to see justice today. The criminal fraud trial of Jawad Rothor and Vince Petroza, principals in Fortress Real Developments, receives a decision in their judge-alone trial. The men are alleged of syndicated mortgage fraud related to the Sky City condo development in Winnipeg, a development that never went ahead. Toronto's Nikolai Chematov lost $90,000 in the Sky City project.
I'm not really young, but I still have some time ahead of me. I can probably recover from this situation, right? And again, from the financial perspective, from the monetary perspective. But there is a lot of elderly people who really suffered from this.
When the 2 men were charged, CBC spoke to one retiree who lost so much money on Fortress projects, he was forced to go back to work. An expert says a ruling in the Peter Nygard case will help protect the independence of prosecutors. A provincial court judge found there had been political interference in Nygard's case in Manitoba. The judge said it's because former Attorney General Kelvin Gertsen asked for a second opinion on an initial decision to not charge the former fashion mogul. Nygard was later charged with sexual assault and forcible confinement after a review by Saskatchewan prosecutors. University of Manitoba Associate Professor of Law Brandon Trask says the decision sends a strong message.
Now going forward, there is pretty clear precedent from Judge Harvey's decision that should really help to inform and hopefully guard against similar actions in the future.
Trask says while the decision won't be binding outside the province, it could have an impact on similar cases elsewhere. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
All right, let's go to Abby Adiyemi. It's time for your regional forecast on CBC. What do you know?
It's going to be warm and hazy in the southern parts of the province, and then we're going to see smoky conditions up north. We have that air quality advisory in place due to that smoke in the northern part, the central part, the southeastern part of the province. Poor air quality, reduced visibility. This would stretch from Flintflon, Thompson, Churchill. We will notice it in even the Whiteshell and surrounding areas, and this may affect your health if you are spending extended time outdoors. So I would advise you to reduce your time outdoors because of the smoke. Conditions in Winnipeg, we're looking at warm and hazy also, 13 degrees at this time. It was partly cloudy earlier. The sun is already making its appearance. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds and lingering haze in the air. Temperatures will get to 27 degrees today. In the Pembina Valley region, similar to Winnipeg, covering Morden, Winkler, Altona, Morris, we're seeing temperatures around 13 degrees at this time. Across that area, we're going to see cloudy conditions and clearing and mix of sun and clouds and hazy conditions. Temperatures get to 26 degrees. Brandon, good morning. You are already sunny. We're seeing current temperatures around 5-6 degrees in the Westmount region. Today will be sunny and hazy. Winds will come breezy at some point from the southwest, and temperatures will climb to 25. Gimli's at 13 at this time. We're looking at the Interlake region at this time, expecting mostly sunny skies. A few clouds will roll in, some haze in the air, mild breeze from the south, temperatures warms to 25. Now we track conditions in the north where we have that smoke in the air. The power Flintflon surrounding areas 19 degrees at this time. We have local smoke. Expect sunshine and a mix of sun and clouds with lingering smoke in the air. Winds will be light from the southwest and high would get close to 30 degrees for folks in that region. In Thompson, 14 and cloudy, smoke in the air. Also, special air quality statement also in effect for folks in Thompson. Today brings a mix of sun and clouds with local smoke continuing through the day. Mild breeze from the northwest. Highs would hit 28 degrees. And then further north in Churchill, 13 and mostly cloudy at this time. Also poor air quality in that part of the province due to that fire. Today brings a mix of sun and clouds also, and for folks in Churchill, you see temperatures warm to 23 degrees. So across the province, it's more like hazy and warm conditions today.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
We're still waiting for rain. All right, let's get to what's happening in the commute this morning. Corey's been covering it. Good morning. It's your first time on the airwaves.
Oh, yes. Good morning. Yeah, the Louise Bridge, still according to the city's website, is closed today. And today is, at least according to the website, supposed to be the last day. But if that...
Actually, we have updated information. It's extended to June 1st.
Oh, it is now extended to June. Okay, thank you for that update. So extended till June 1st. Other than that, though, if you do see something going on, anything else out there, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
You owe Sierra $2 for that tip.
Yeah, thank you, Sierra.
There's an inside joke here. Every time something happens, Abby says we owe him $2.
Mm-hmm.
So now we just all owe each other $2 a lot.
I'm in deep debt.
No one ever pays. It is 20-7 right now on 89.3 FM. Thanks for joining our team here at CBC. You're listening to The Morning Show, Information Radio, and Phil DeMont is here with the Business Report. Good morning.
Morning, Marcy.
So let's go to the throne speech. The government talked about transforming Canada's economy. We just had an interview about, July 1st being a tight deadline for interprovincial trade. But can you tell us more about, through your business lens, what you saw in this speech and what Prime Minister Carney might mean by that to you?
Yeah, they focused a lot, or they have focused a lot in the past of Canada being an economic superpower. I think to some degree what they're talking about is business types like Carney, in the sense that there was a sense that Justin Trudeau maybe was an equitable kind of prime minister, not interested in quote unquote growing the pie, but dividing the pie up more fairly. There's a sense among business types that Carney's a little more interested in growing the pie. So you look on the surface, some of the stuff, the talk in the throne speech and before it was rhetorical. Every prime minister says he or she will jumpstart the economy. Here, though, there might be a little more meat to that. There's the economic superpower, but Ottawa appears serious about diversifying Canada's trading partners. I calculated this. In March, our exports to other countries grew twice as fast as our sales to the U.S. if you go back to last March, so the 12-month period. Mark Carney's a former central banker. So here, the government talked about reducing public spending. But to be honest, every government I've looked at has balanced the budget by capping the growth on spending, not actually reducing the dollar amount. So I don't think Carney's talking about taking $100 and taking it to $90. I think what he's saying is, got $100, could go to $120, I'll keep it at $110, that kind of math. The big change, though, you're right, is around trade barriers between provinces. Seems to be a lot more push this time around to get those kind of deals done. Before, you'd kind of have a lot of provincial issues popping up and then governments back off. But Canada's economy could gain as much as $160 billion by dumping different provincial regulations. That's about 6% of last year's GDP. And it's things like, and I just looked some of these up, it takes 4 years for someone from another province to become a plumber in Saskatchewan. Getting carpentry papers takes an out-of-province tradesman years, not weeks in some provinces. Liquor and wine's a problem. Getting a trade deal done, though, now, more urgent because of Donald Trump's tariffs on Canadian goods. In recent weeks, Ontario signed agreements with Atlantic provinces like Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Manitoba. Prime Minister Carney looks like, because he's got that deadline, I'm not sure he'll make it, but he can build on the momentum that's going on to get similar deals, getting rid of these barriers across Canada.
Now, there's still, of course, troubling signs for our economy. So what's the latest on that front?
Yeah, more Canadians are having more trouble meeting their debt payments. This is according to Equifax Canada. When you exclude mortgages, the severe debt delinquency rate for Canadians reached 1.6% for the first 3 months of the year. That means Canadians are at least 3 months behind covering that percentage of what they've already borrowed. So that's, the debt load. Might not sound like a big number, 1.6%, but Equifax says it's the highest level of missed payments since 2010. And back then, we were dealing with the fallout from the global financial crisis. And it's not like Canadians are borrowing more. They're not loading up the plastic. The average monthly spend on credit first quarter of this year was at its lowest level in 3 years, but we're paying off a smaller amount of the outstanding debt, so the nugget's not going down. We're also using plastic more to buy essentials. The website NerdWallet said about 75% of Canadians now use credit to buy groceries and the like. That's up from 69% last year. And when you look at Canadians missing mortgage payments, that's also up 75% in the quarter. That sounds like a big number, and I guess it is, but the saving grace is our overall mortgage delinquency rate is still low, only about 15% of the U.S. level, according to the Canadian Bankers Association.
And finally, before we look at the markets, why have stores in the U.K. stopped stocking a popular plushy kids toy?
Yeah, because people have begun fighting over it, like physically. This is the La Boo Boo. It's a plush doll out of Hong Kong and been around since 2015, so you wonder what the push is now. Celebrities have begun sporting the doll in various forms. Most importantly, Lisa from the K-pop band Blackpink was shown recently on Instagram hugging one of the dolls, and the popularity of the doll took off. So any new release of La Boo Boo is sold out in minutes, but problems have resulted. In Singapore, police were called to manage an unruly crowd at a toy show where the doll was on display. Same city, a family was caught on camera breaking into a claw machine like you'd see at a fair and stealing 3 La Boo Boos. I know, on camera. The UK, though, it's the worst. Some
Hey, kids, let's go steal La Boo Boos.
Yeah, I know, like a family outing. I know, apparently. In some cities in the UK, fans have begun pummeling each other with fists at Pop Mart's outlets to get the latest Labubu. Now, the toy chain says it stopped stocking the doll, but this is only the latest in a long list of popular kids' toys that induce fist fights among parents. Furby's Cabbage Patch dolls, Tickle Me Elmo have turned placid parents into pugilists as they pummel each other in an effort to bring joy to their children. I bet that's a happy Christmas.
You know what I say to this? Labu. Boo.
I hope I pronounced that right. I don't know. It's just a funny-looking doll.
What's going on in the market so far this morning?
In Europe, the euphoria over reduced trade tensions with the U.S. looks to be over, at least for today. Germany, France, UK down marginally. Down as well in Asia, the Hong Kong market off 0.5%. Oil up 50 cents, $61.34 a barrel. Gold's up $9, $3,308 U.S. an ounce. And the Canadian dollar off about 1/3 cent, trading at 72.31 cents U.S.
All right, Phil, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
Just in case you're wondering, because it is radio after all, folks, it is a funny looking doll. It kind of reminds me of Monchichi back in the 80s, but the face is plastic. The body is all plushy around. It's got kind of a big toothy smile, a grin, almost like a jack-o'-lantern or something. And then it's got big bunny looking ears. La boo boo. Don't fight over it. Business news with Phil DeMont. He'll join us again tomorrow. Still ahead this half hour, we're going to talk to Dr. Raj Bhardwaj on our medical column to talk more about measles and how it's spreading in Canada. We've been doing weekly check-ins here. 13 degrees in Winnipeg. It's mostly cloudy. Our high today is going to be 27, but it will be hazy this morning, and a mix of sun and cloud through that haze is what we are expecting. Well, a bit of music before the medical column, and this is from a Toronto artist who comes to us by way of Nigeria. It's called The Honest Guy. He's a top 10 finalist in CBC Music's Searchlight competition. You might have heard him there. He's also been a Juno nominee. His latest is all part of what he calls funky soul. This is One More Time.
Heard you got a new man, I'm crushed. Had to find out from someone else. Guessing our love didn't mean a thing. Told me was the move and I'm worth it. It's the portrait that you paint and picture perfect. It's been in with my heart. No more games. Playing games. It's clear you made your mind. And I won't waste your time. It's a hard line living here without you, baby. Without you, babe. It's a hard line you're drawing with the words you say. Still I'm wondering. Don't you wanna try one more time? Try. Don't you wanna try one more time? One more time. Try with all my energy, holding on to memories. Hope that you come back to me, girl. Try with all my energy, holding on to you and me. Pray that you'll come back to me. So all I'm living here without you, babe. Without you, babe. It's a hard line you're drawing with the words you say. Still I'm wondering. Don't you wanna try one more time? Try. Don't you wanna kissing on your body, now I'm saying sorry. Crying that I want you back. Used to be my shawty, kissing on your body, now I'm saying sorry. Crying that I want you back.
It's Juno nominee The Honest Guy at a Toronto tune's called One More Time. Super Chill on CBC. I'm RC Marcusa. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. You're on in Information Radio. It's your morning show, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us. I just want to mention that we have put a shout out on Facebook this morning. This is my Marcy Marcusa page. During this show, I know many people listen and then also communicate there. And I'm just calling out today specifically to ask if you're in the Flintflon and Easterville area and you have obviously a safe ability to share. We're wondering how wildfires are affecting you in that part of the province this morning. So you can weigh in there. You can call us in the live line at 788-3093. Well, next on the show, let's look at something else that affects our health besides the smoke from wildfires. I'm talking about measles. It continues its spread through Canada, in part due to low vaccination rates. But if you are immunized or if you had measles as a child, how does this situation affect you? What are some of the factors that set measles apart as well as an infectious disease? Well, Dr. Raj Bhardwaj actually has this as a subject on his medical column, and we recently spoke about it.
Good morning, Marcy.
So for people who are hearing news about the spread of measles but may not feel affected, I wonder as a doctor, as you see it, why does it matter?
Yeah, really interesting kind of human nature type of question. I was talking to some friends and, I was talking about measles and they said, yeah, but why should I care? I'm fully vaccinated and what more can I do? And that sounds pretty reasonable. But I think there's a couple of things. I mean, first of all, people should be paying attention to the measles story because measles is sort of the first domino to fall when it comes to vaccine preventable illnesses because it's really the most contagious of them. And so that's, something to consider. I mean, measles was, declared eliminated from Canada in 1998. So there's an entire generation of people out there, including, parents and doctors, who haven't really seen it and haven't really seen the devastation and misery that measles can cause. And then the other thing is that it leaves, as our vaccination rates fall, like you said, it leaves people vulnerable to other infections too, like things like whooping cough and meningitis from other vaccine preventable infections, especially in young kids. And the other thing is that it matters for the overall health of everyone, including people who can't get vaccinated. So I'm thinking infants and, pregnant people and people with immune system issues, to name a few. I mean, the rest of us, sort of as society, I think we have to help protect those folks.
Can you describe what a case of measles looks like? Like, how does it actually present and how does it feel?
Yeah, so this is the tough thing about measles is that it looks and feels at the beginning exactly like every other cold kind of thing. So textbook case of measles starts with cough, runny nose, sometimes pink eyes, fever, feeling tired, stuff like that, which sounds like every other cold, right? Eventually, a reddish rash starts, usually on the face. It works its way down the body. The rash can get really bad, and it can peel away the skin, almost like a burn. But overall, people feel sick for a week or two, sometimes longer, with sort of an ongoing, lingering, tiredness or so. And overall, about 1 in 10 people with measles, and overall about 1 in 5 kids under 5 years old with measles have to be admitted to hospital because of the measles infection.
And what are the worst case scenarios, just to remind us here?
Yeah, I think there's sort of the immediate and the long term. Okay, so the immediate ones that we worry about, things like bad ear infections or pneumonia or diarrhea or brain infections. Those are the types of things that can alter a kid's life by, scarring their lungs or causing deafness or brain damage. The rates of complications of those are about 1 in 10 for a bad ear infection, 1 in 10 for, bad pneumonia, diarrhea, things like that. About 1 in 1,000 kids with measles will get brain inflammation. And overall, about 1 in 1,000 people die from measles. Even perfectly healthy people in modern times with modern medical treatments. There aren't any specific treatments for measles, though. And then the sort of second kind of worst case scenario type stuff is the years after the infection. So one thing that measles does is it wipes out a person's immune system memory for all sorts of germs and infections that they've already learned to fight off, either because they've had them in the past or they've been vaccinated against them. And that's why there's actually an increase in the death rate for people who've had measles for about 5 years after their measles infection, because they become more prone to catching these other infections. They become worse at fighting them off compared to if they had never caught measles. And then the really worst case, luckily very rare, is a form of brain inflammation and scarring that happens up to a decade after you recover from a measles infection. And it's fatal. But it's very rare. It's like maybe 750 cases per million kids under 5 who get measles, maybe double that in kids under a year old. So if they got measles when they were under a year old, might have fully recovered, but then when they're, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, they can suddenly get this brain inflammation, and it's fatal. And like I said, luckily it's rare.
Why is measles so contagious? Just remind us of how it spreads.
Yeah, so contagious for 3 big reasons, right? So one is that you breathe out the virus. It's transmitted, through surfaces for sure. If you're, coughing on a toy or licking a doorknob or whatever, the virus can survive on that surface for a couple of hours, but it can also survive in the air for a couple of hours. And it survives in the air to the point where if as a somebody who's not fully immunized or fully immune to measles, if you breathe in the air that was contaminated with virus, even a couple of hours prior, it can expose you to the virus. And then the other thing is that, you think, well, nobody around me has measles. How did I catch it? People are spreading the measles virus. They're contagious from about 5 days before their rash showed up to about 5 days after. So that means they're spreading the measles virus when it looks like all they've got is a minor cold. So that combination of being super contagious when it looks like a cold, that it hangs in the air for a couple of hours, plus the fact that our, in a lot of places, vaccination rates are very low. That's why it's really contagious, why it's spreading so badly.
What's your feeling around measles continuing to spread in the way it is in this country? Like, do you have surprise about that or not?
Yeah, I think, like I said, we've got a whole generation of folks who've never seen the devastation that measles can cause. So I think that a lot of us, including doctors, I think sometimes have become sort of lackadaisical about it, and when our vaccination rates are low, it's going to spread, and especially with measles, because people are spreading it unknowingly before they realize they have measles. Vaccination becomes a bigger layer of protection other than, on top of things like staying home when you're sick and, cleaning the air and doing things outdoors and stuff like that and wearing a mask. Because you can do that once it's like, oops, I have measles. Now I should wear a mask and I should stay home. It's like you've already been spreading the virus for 5 days. So, I guess at some level I'm not surprised that it's doing this. This is why measles was targeted as one of those things that we need to try to eliminate from the country.
All right, Dr. Bardwaj, thank you for this morning. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That's our medical column with Raj Bardwaj. And now at 3 minutes to 7 o'clock, let's go to Heather Wells for our news headlines.
Good morning. Well, it's an early start to the day as a lineup outside MPI on Bison Drive is growing. The lineup is for registration for limited spots in MPI's Driver Z summer program. Some people have been in that line since 5 this morning. 2 men convicted of human smuggling in a case where a family of 4 from India died trying to cross the border from Manitoba into the U.S. in 2022 are expected to learn their fates in court today. Steve Shand of Florida and Indian national Harsh Kumar Patel were convicted by a Minnesota jury back in November. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Coming up after 7, on stage at the Gargoyle Theatre, cannibalism and queerness intersect.
And Jenny and Sandy come out looking like some kind of horror show.
Well, what happened?
They attack people, bite people or whatever. I mean, it was a big part of the story. It's not an urban legend.
We're going to get a preview of how they'll tell it. It's a play that explores themes about the stories we tell, how rumors can start, and the potential harm that comes with it. Also, what a Winnipeg mother went through to access mental health care that she needed, and not face the risk of losing her children in the process, or rather she did face the risk. We're going to hear why. Her story is coming up on Information Radio. She's written a powerful opinion piece if you want to read it on our website in advance as well, cbc.ca/Manitoba. And right after 7 o'clock, if you're one of those people that said, you know what, our city wouldn't be broke if we just hadn't had property tax freezes for all of those years, I think it was 14 and counting, we're going to hear about a new book that challenges that idea, but also does talk about how Winnipeg can get ahead of our current financial situation and what it looks like historically. So stay tuned. Book's called You'll Pay for This. It's 13 in Winnipeg, air quality advisories in the fire zones, and 788-3093 in traffic.
Today on The Current.
Take that new microbe and put it to work and maybe engineer it to make things for us.
It came from outer space on board a Chinese space station. Scientists are hoping the discovery of a new bacteria that lives in space can teach us about ways for humans to survive and thrive in extreme conditions. That's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. As children, they were torn from their families and communities. Tens of thousands of Indigenous youth were part of the Indian boarding home program. They were sent to live with strangers to get an off-reserve education. They lost their language and culture. Many suffered abuse. As Kate Rutherford reports, the adult survivors of that government program are now being urged to come forward and claim compensation.
Pass me that box of Kleenex, please. Blow my nose before I cry.
71-year-old Marilyn Gaudreau laughs nervously, having never talked about the trauma of being relocated to a different community for high school. She's a member of Matagami First Nation, south of Timmins, Ontario. The government placed her and her cousin with a young couple in Kirkland Lake in 1969.
A lot of arguing and drinking when he come home. He was always mad, but this was the worst night we ever had.
That was the night their landlord threatened to burn the house down. After that, they were boarded in a home that wasn't any better.
So we were isolated, and that was hard.
They never completed high school. They are among an estimated 40,000 survivors eligible for compensation after a 2019 class action lawsuit against Canada was settled out of court. Efforts are being made to connect with survivors. Lawyer William Platt is a claims administrator but says they don't have a list of names.
Due to privacy legislation, Canada, can't or won't be able to share that list with us.
$50 million is set aside to recognize loss of language and culture and to compensate for additional abuses such as violence, starvation, and forced labor. Melissa Etier, Marilyn's cousin, gave up her dream of being a nurse, but proudly says their children all graduated from high school and never went hungry.
We broke the chain and we gave them what we couldn't have.
The deadline to file claims is February 2027. Kate Rutherford, CBC News, Matagami First Nation.
U.S. President Donald Trump says if Canada wants to join his proposed Golden Dome missile defense system, it will cost $61 billion US. But if Canada becomes the 51st state, he says it will cost nothing to join. On social media, Trump claimed Ottawa is considering the offer. But in an interview with Power and Politics, Prime Minister Mark Carney said he is focused on strengthening security agreements with other countries.
We are seeing the danger of over-reliance on the United States economically and also from a security perspective. So we will cooperate where necessary, when it's in both of our interests very clearly, but we won't necessarily cooperate.
Carney says he hopes Canada will be able to join Rearm Europe by July 1st. It is a European defense plan which sees countries spend $1.25 trillion on defense over the next 5 years. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is calling for a three-way summit with U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. Zelensky says he wants to sit down in person to discuss ending Russia's war in Ukraine. He made the comments ahead of his meeting today with Germany's new chancellor in Berlin. Anna Cunningham reports.
Welcome to Berlin.
This visit comes at a pivotal time for Ukraine, just days after Russia launched its heaviest missile and drone attack of the war to date. Overnight, Moscow's defense ministry says Kyiv carried out its biggest drone attack, firing almost 300 drones on Russia. Discussions in Berlin with the new German Chancellor Friedrich Merz will focus on German support for Ukraine and efforts to secure a ceasefire with Russia. Conservative Merz has vowed to continue his country's strong backing for Ukraine. In comments published ahead of the talks, President Volodymyr Zelensky says if President Vladimir Putin is not comfortable with a bilateral meeting, he is ready for any format, including, he says, a Trump-Putin-me meeting. Zelensky says he wants $30 billion to fully fund Ukraine's defence manufacturing capacity. He says he will attend next month's G7 meeting in Alberta. But he dismissed Russian suggestions that the next round of peace talks takes place in Belarus, a key ally of Russia, saying that is impossible. Instead, he says the most realistic locations are Turkey, Switzerland or the Vatican. But he says Malta and African nations have also offered to host peace talks. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says Russia will announce the next round of direct talks in the near future, adding the neutral status of Ukraine remains one of Russia's key demands in peace negotiations. Ukraine has already said it is ready for an unconditional ceasefire. Anna Cunningham, CBC News, London.
Israel is marking 600 days since the start of the war in Gaza. Vigils are being held across the country, calling on Israel's government to bring home the remaining hostages being held by Hamas. And inside Gaza, people are rushing aid locations for food after nearly 3 months of Israeli blockade. Tom Perry is in Jerusalem with more.
On a beach in Tel Aviv, protesters have posted in huge letters in the sand a simple message: 600 days, save them now. A plea for the 58 Israeli hostages, living and dead, still held by Hamas.
600 days of darkness, 600 days without freedom, 600 days of abandonment.
Efrat Machakawa's uncle Gadi Moses was taken by Hamas on October 7th and freed in a ceasefire deal in January. Across Israel, there have been persistent calls for the Israeli government to end the war in Gaza and bring the remaining hostages home, while in Gaza, the suffering continues. Crowds of desperate Palestinians stormed an aid distribution site yesterday. The site was set up by the newly formed group, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Israel sees the organization as an alternative to programs run through the United Nations, but the UN says this new group lacks the expertise and resources to get aid into Gaza. It's urging the Israeli government to ease tight restrictions and ensure the Palestinian people get the help they need. Tom Perry, CBC News, Jerusalem.
A verdict is expected today in the case of a retired French surgeon accused of raping hundreds of young patients. 74-year-old Joël Lescournac is charged with aggravated rape and sexual assault against 299 of his patients. Most of them were children who were under anesthesia at the time. The alleged abuse took place over 25 years, dating back to 1989. If convicted in this trial, Lescournac could be sentenced to up to 20 years in prison. This is France's largest child sex abuse case ever to go to trial. Globally, the last 10 years were the hottest ever measured, and the World Meteorological Organization says the next 5 years could be even hotter. It says there is an 80% chance at least one of the next 5 years will exceed 2024 as the warmest on record. Adam Schaaf worked on the report.
The only feasible way to reduce global temperature and global warming is by the reduction of emissions. And the only way we can do that is by the biggest emitters reducing their CO2 under the greenhouse gas outputs.
He says as temperatures rise, there is an increased risk of dying in the Amazon and North America and very wet weather over Northern Europe. A 96-year-old Nova Scotia woman is trying a unique way to find a family doctor. Dorothy Lamont of Dartmouth does not have a primary health care provider and is determined to draw attention to her search. The CBC's Nicolas Seguin has her story.
They'll know I'm still alive.
They'll know you're still alive and kicking. This is kind of like your personal advertisement.
Right.
96-year-old Dorothy Lamont and her son Stuart huddle around the local newspaper. On page 3, an ad titled "Seeking a Physician." written by Dorothy. She says it's her last-ditch effort to find a doctor after 3 years without one.
I really didn't know what else to do. Any problem I get, I have no one to turn to.
Though Dorothy's method is unique, her story isn't. An estimated 6.5 million Canadians don't have a family doctor. In Nova Scotia, that number is decreasing, but still sits at more than 90,000 people, close to 9% of the population.
At 96, I think you deserve a bit better.
Stuart Lamont says his mother isn't trying to make a political statement, just stand up for herself and other seniors. Bethany McCormick with Nova Scotia's Health Authority says she's never heard of someone using this method.
I think that person is trying to advocate for their healthcare needs, which I think is important.
Stuart Lamont says after the ad was published, a medical clinic called saying a new doctor could take Dorothy as a patient. Dorothy says she hopes she was prioritized because she's 96. Not because of her ad. Nicola Sagan, CBC News, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us wherever you're listening from. We do have developing fire problems this morning around the Flintflon area. We're trying to get some more information. We'll go to Heather Wells with headlines in just a moment. We have air quality statements issued where obviously it's challenging and smoky up around that part of the province and more. So Abby will be in with the latest on that. In Winnipeg, we're hazy and we are sunny right now downtown outside our studios. This hour on the program, we're going to be talking about a book called You'll Pay for This. It covers Winnipeg's finances, infrastructure, and why we don't seem to be able to get ahead. I love it though because it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. One chapter is called Bond, Municipal Bond. So stay tuned. We're going to tell you all about that and talk to the local author. In addition, this hour on the program, we're going to hear from a Winnipeg mother and hear what she went through to access mental health care that she needed and why she faced the risk of losing her children in the process as she was trying to access health care. She had more than just a baby blues, she says, but it wasn't postpartum depression either. So we're going to find out how she got the help she needed and also why she's speaking out about what extra supports and other supports are needed out there to help other moms like her. So stay tuned. She'll be here just before 8 o'clock. Right now, Heather Wells, as mentioned, is here with our news update. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, people in Flintflon are on evacuation alert as fire burning in Creighton, Saskatchewan crosses the Manitoba border. The northern city says that wildfire started in a landfill in Creighton, and the alert was issued because of dry conditions and the proximity to the fire. The cousin of one of 4 vulnerable First Nations women killed by a convicted serial killer says there still aren't enough safe spaces for vulnerable women in shelters. Melissa Robinson wants to see emergency shelters exclusively for women in several neighborhoods. We'll hear more coming up on our next local news at 7:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, Abby, I have a little thing to share just before you get into the weather and the air quality.
Oh, please do.
It's one of these things that speaks to the fact that we live in a big province, but in many ways we're like a small family, right? All of us in Manitoba.
That's true.
So yesterday we were in Lac du Bonnet and we were covering their wildfire now considered under control, but of course residents trying to move forward. There was loss of life and complete devastation, especially on one portion of Wendigo Road. So we were set up broadcasting, but we took this photo and it's kind of iconic. It's been shared a whole bunch of times on Lac du Bonnet and loving it. And what it is it's in the worst destroyed area. Everything's gray and there's this pop of purple. So it's this flower basket that was put there. A lot of people are seeing it as hopeful. Well, of all things, I came in and I got back to Winnipeg and opened my Facebook today. And listeners write to me there a lot. And I hope you write to me there too, Marcy Marcusa online. But Pamela Lynn said, hey, did you water my flowers? So she actually, I thought the flowers were put there by someone to somebody maybe that wasn't attached to the properties for a hopeful sign, but it was her property that went there. So she wrote, here's a picture of our son carrying the flowers in a boat on the water, going out to see the shoreline and what's left of our cabin for the first time on Wendigo. And then I guess they hung those flowers there. So the Bird River fire was in the foreground of this photo that she sent me. So we know who put the purple flowers there. So Pamela, sorry for your loss of your structure there and your place. And yeah, just a sign of hope. But I never expected we find who put the flowers.
Yeah, those little things that just brings back hope.
Yeah, they really do. All right. So unfortunately, we don't have hope in terms of rain in the forecast, and we have lots of air quality problems. So where do you want to start?
Let's start with that air quality warning, which is in effect for much of the province due to that smoke from the fire. We're talking about tracking it from Flintflon all the way to Churchill in the northern part of the province. Then we're tracking it through Burns River in the central part into the southeastern around the Interprovincial Park, all the way down to the White Shell. The smoke is making the air really hazy and hard to breathe. So due to this warm and dry conditions there, the winds might be light, the smoke will be sticking around. If you are in any of these areas mentioned, it's best to take it easy and avoid spending too much time outdoors due to this smoke in the air. But for Winnipeg at this time, it's sunny outside. We're seeing temperatures hover around 13 and 14 degrees in the Red River Valley region. As the day goes on, we'll see a mix of sun and clouds with some smoke still in the air. It's going to get warm in the afternoon. We get to 27 degrees. Some light winds from the north will make things feel really pleasant, and skies will stay mostly clear for most of the day, but the haze will be noticeable. And tomorrow, Marcy, the sun returns, but the smoky skies are still going to be sticking around, and tomorrow is going to be a hot one. We're looking at temperatures warming up close to 30 degrees. Similar conditions we're seeing down south, temperatures around 13 degrees at this point. Up north, we're also seeing 13 to 19 in the powerful influence into Churchill areas. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at 13 degrees and we're warming up to 27.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey's in with a bit of a traffic update, and then to also update us on what's happening. He's been trying to reach people. You've been trying to reach people up around Flintflon around the fire situation, right?
Yeah, because last night there was it was called a pre-alert order saying folks like, hey, there's a fire nearby. There's a large fire just outside of Flintflon. Get ready to evacuate. So make sure your car's got a lot of fuel so you can ready to hit the road if you need to, things like that. So we're hoping to get an update, hopefully maybe from the mayor after 8. I know I was chatting with one person who works for the city. They said they're going to the office at 8 and they're getting an update then.
Okay.
So we'll see how that goes. I'm trying to talk to some residents as well. So
some of the pictures on their local Facebook pages from are really, it's really clear.
You can see the red glow
flames,
last night from there's a few people who took pictures. Yeah.
So it's getting close. So this is a pre-alert evacuation notice, as Corey said, for Flintflon. It's a 1,000-hectare wildfire. Heather also had this in her headlines, and that community has about 5,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what is going to develop there. Hopefully everyone is safe. What do you know about traffic here down south and otherwise?
Yeah. Let's start the Louise Bridge. It is expected to still be closed until June 1st now. It's kind of been extended a few times. So heads up there. Can't go on that. As well, Chief Peguis, both ways from essentially Henderson to La Jamaudière, is also down to one lane going both ways. And that construction is supposed to be in effect until May 30th. So still a couple more days of slow going there. If you have any other updates for me, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, next on the show, if you've ever wondered where your property tax dollars are going, usually you start by looking around, right? Local amenities that add to your quality of life. We look to our parks, our pools, our libraries, and so on. But even then, you might be only scratching the surface of how municipal funding is allocated. It seems complicated, and if you're not good with numbers and you want to listen to our next interview, because a Winnipegger, an author, has set out to help Winnipeggers understand municipal finances. His name is Michel Durand-Wood. His book is You'll Pay for This. It was released last week, and you might also know him as a blogger, the Dear Winnipeg blogger in the city. Thanks for coming in.
Hey, so happy to be here.
What I love about this, You'll Pay for This book, is you say something along the lines of, I was reading this yesterday, you say something along the lines of right away, I care about all cities. Well, hang on a minute. I care about my city.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Which is Winnipeg. This is not a book about municipal finances. This is a book about Winnipeg finances.
Well, it is and it isn't, right? It's the reality is most cities in North America are sort of facing the same financial illness. They're all at maybe different stages of it, but while this is a book about Winnipeg, it's really a book about every North American city. And I'm using Winnipeg as the case study, so people from Winnipeg will absolutely see themselves in it, obviously, because I'm actually literally talking about Winnipeg. But what I found just with my blog as well, is like 2/3 of people who are reading it are from outside of Winnipeg. People just really, they know they're reading about Winnipeg, but they see their cities there because they see the same struggles and the same problems. And so the book is the same thing. It's Winnipeg more as a case study, but it's about the general financial struggles of all North American cities.
I'll credit you, but I'm stealing that phrase, financial illness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you hope people get out of the book? Obviously an understanding about how our money goes in and out. But what's sort of, when you were thinking about writing this, who's reading it?
Yeah, well, this is meant for everybody, essentially. This is meant to be, oftentimes we see ourselves as customers of the city, but we're not. We're actually co-owners of it, right? This is a cooperative nonprofit that we all co-own together. And so as co-owners, it's kind of our responsibility to have at least a general sense of how we're doing financially, right? As a business owner, you would never ignore how your business is doing financially. And so as co-owners of this nonprofit co-op that we call the City of Winnipeg, it's our responsibility to do that. So my goal was to sort of educate kind of everybody, right? Whether it's citizens or councillors or local media.
I got to keep it in my desk when we cover budget.
Yeah, just to have at least a general basic understanding.
So let's talk about the Winnipeg case study, because you do this lovely thing. You actually have a thread that helps it be really accessible, and you're a really funny writer too.
Thanks.
But you use the thread Elmwood Park, or Roxy Park for you and I who come from that end of town.
Yeah.
I knew it as Roxy. You talk about how they used to have a gardener. You go back to the 60s and you say, the gardener planted 1,200 flowers every spring. Why could we afford that? And now Roxy Park doesn't have that kind of a landscape. And you kind of then use that as a compare and contrast. You also go through different budgets. And you actually make this case that, a lot of people say, oh, it's because we had tax freezes so many years, that's why we have no money. But then you go way back and say, well, we had no money this year and that year. You had to go to 1946 to find a quote headline that said a good city budget. So why aren't tax freezes to blame for our challenges with spending in your view? How do you argue that?
Yeah, so
or solely to blame?
A lot of it comes down to how we account for stuff and the fact that a lot of people don't understand accounting, which is obviously normal. I talk in the book about only 0.5% of Canadians are accountants, right? So 99.5% of us are not accountants. So it's normal that we wouldn't see through the accounting of how we do things. But it comes down to the difference between an operating budget and a capital budget. Right, the operating budget is something that happens every year, and the capital budget is something that has sort of long-term impacts. Right, so anytime we build a bridge or a community center or a road or put a pipe in the ground, that's going to have impacts over decades and decades and decades. And so while our operating budget happens this year, we pay a librarian, we pay a gardener. Once we pay that money, there's no further obligation to the city, right? Unless the librarian or the gardener works again, we're not stuck paying again. But with a road or with anything else, there's maintenance that continues to come back. Even after we've done the maintenance, there's more maintenance. And so when we're looking at, what we're essentially the question about tax freezes is what we're doing is we're dealing with symptoms. We're not actually dealing with the underlying disease or the illness, right? So when we get to a point where we can't afford whatever we need to pay for that year because of inflation or because of whatever, what have you, there are two ways to deal with that. One way is to cut services so that we can pay for what we need to within the money we have, and the other one is to increase taxes. That's the choice. And so for 14 years, the choice we made was to cut services, right? So had we instead chosen to increase taxes, today we wouldn't have more money, we'd just have more services.
So what is the way forward then? What are some of the solutions that you see?
So it really comes down to how we've built our city, because the major problem is that, when we look at the roads that we can't maintain, we look at the sewage, everything, when we actually sit down and ask how much would it cost to maintain all of that, that number is so insane that it doesn't make any sense. That money doesn't exist at any level of government because it ultimately comes from us. And we don't have the amount of money that takes. So it comes down to building a different kind of city that is more infrastructure light, right? And so that's a lot more people biking, a lot more people taking transit, walking. It means more locations closer together, so infill development. It means, more green space to make those places pleasant.
Does it mean closing current infrastructure as well, though?
Well, it
pools, community centers, like the continuation of that, because to maintain them is a huge.
So that's actually the thing, is we actually can't afford the city we have built. But again, when we ask how much, 88% of our infrastructure is just the roads and pipes, right? So 12% is everything else, pools, community centers. So we could actually close every single pool, community center, civic building, library, all of it, and that'll just get us 12%. So really the major issue is where things are. It's the roads and pipes. So that's where we're going to have the biggest impact.
For listeners that don't know, what's your background in municipal politics and finance to be able to walk us through all of this?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm a autodidact, I guess. I've been writing about municipal finance and infrastructure for 7 or 8 years now. A lot of it I learned on the go. But yeah, to the point that nowadays, now I've got a book, and I actually do speaking all over throughout North America on city finance. So I've kind of become an expert over the span of a decade, I guess. Yeah.
I love that you incorporate humor. My favorite was you're kind of walking us through. You're saying, okay, this is heavy stuff. Get a glass of wine, or grab something colder. You actually have a recipe for some kind of a great punch in here. When I got to that point, it was like, this is going to get really crazy. I better give you the recipe. Like grape juice and ginger ale and something sparkling, I think. Yeah.
I mean, the point is, you even say the words municipal finance and people's eyes glaze over right away, because they don't think it's interesting, or they're intimidated by the topic. But the reality is it's something that people can understand. And so I find that humor is a great way to approach things like that. I'm hugely inspired by the likes of Bill Nye the Science Guy, or Jon Stewart's Daily Show, or Good Eats by Alton Brown, which was an old show decades ago, like where they're funny and they're entertaining first, but meanwhile you're learning a lot of really important stuff. So I wanted to use the same kind of approach with the book and with the blog as well, to use humor to disarm people, to keep their minds open to bringing this very important information into their brains.
Well, I learned a ton, and I'm telling you, it's a good read. It's a smart read, and you probably go back to the chapter going, did I understand that correctly? When something comes, you know, when we start paying our taxes and covering the budget, you're going to want to have it in hand, probably. We're going to give this copy away. Michelle, thank you very much for the coming in, telling us about the new book, and appreciate having you on.
So happy to be here. Thanks, Marcy.
That's Michelle Durand-Wood, the author of You'll Pay for This. You want to read it? You want to read it. Email us. This is what I'm going to have you do here. So email win@cbc.ca. Tell us, what would you spend money on if you were going to improve Winnipeg? What would you spend the money on if you were going to improve Winnipeg? And so you can write to us at win@cbc.ca. Well, speaking of winning, the Edmonton Oilers last night, let's get to morning sports. Scott Reguer, pretty exciting for them. They're 1 win away now from making the final of the Stanley Cup.
They are, after beating Dallas again last night, Marcy. And again, it was a scoreline that probably flatters the Oilers, who prevailed 4-1, but a couple of their goals went into an empty net at the end of the game. Regardless, Edmonton can finish things off in Texas tomorrow. Star forward Leon Draisaitl shared his thoughts.
Feeling's good, of course. We just won a big game at home. And we're going to Dallas to have the chance to move on to the Stanley Cup Finals. If that doesn't get you excited, I'm not sure what will, but that's going to be the toughest game of the series. We know that. We've been in that situation. So, yeah, get ready for it.
Yeah, Draisaitl, a goal and an assist last night, one of many highlights for the Oilers. But here was a non-highlight, a low light. Zach Hyman, who has led the playoffs in body checks, took one himself last night and forced him out of the game early. He looked very uncomfortable. So it's Edmonton's grit as much as it's guile that's got them this far. Hyman's injury is something to monitor.
Now, there's been plenty of grit in the NBA playoffs as well, Scott, including in Indianapolis last night.
Yeah, and no one showed more of that than Pacers star Tyrese Halliburton, who had 32 points, 15 assists, 12 rebounds. He pulled off that triple-double without turning the ball over even once, something, that stat line, that's never been managed before in an NBA playoff game. Taking it all in was Halliburton's dad, John, who had been banned by the team for running out onto the court in a previous series to taunt Milwaukee star Giannis Antetokounmpo. Tyrese was asked about his father.
I'm going to be honest with you guys here. Like, my dad is just fine. He's at the house watching the game in a beautiful home, or he finds his way in some sports bar with a bunch of Pacer fans. Yeah, I was happy he was in the building. Obviously, Triple H is in the building. That might have been a little, I ain't gonna say it was more special. Triple H being in the building was pretty fired.
Triple H, of course, a wrestling star from back in the 1990s. You knew that, though, right, Marcy?
No.
Big Triple H?
Yes.
No,
sure, of course.
Indiana can book their spot in the final tomorrow. Oklahoma City can do it tonight with another win against Minnesota.
I'm too old. I'm like Hulk Hogan days. All right. Toughness seems to be a theme of the podcast. So let's end with a Canadian teen who's showing plenty of toughness at the French Open.
Yeah, Victoria Mboko just won her second round match this morning. This is the 18-year-old from Toronto's first Grand Slam tournament, and she's run roughshod over her competition so far, winning 3 matches in qualifying and now 2 more in the main draw. All of them, by the way, in straight sets. Impressive stuff, and we'll see how she acquits herself tomorrow. She's got a dandy of a match against China's Qing Wenzhen, who won Olympic gold on the clay of Roland Garros just last summer. So we'll look forward to that tomorrow.
All right. Thanks a lot, Scott.
You betcha.
With your sports report, that's Scott Ricare. Quick traffic notes here. Louise Bridge is closed till June 1st now, and the St. Vital Bridge is down to 1 lane in each direction. So that's been like that for a couple of weeks now, but it is causing big delays in the evening. This morning, we'll see how you do through there. It could cause delays for northbound. 788-3093 if you want to reach us with any traffic information. 14 and partly cloudy in Winnipeg. And still ahead, a fictional resort town in Manitoba has a shocking history. Or does it? We'll get a preview of a new play in Winnipeg. The questions, the stories we tell when they're not ours to tell. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, we do have sun out there. We're going to see more haze again today, and this is where the heat up really begins. A high today of 27, even hotter tomorrow. Well, a lineup is growing just outside the MPI office on Bison Drive, all there for the Driver's Ed program. CBC reporter Megan Ketchison is there as well. Megan?
Well, even since this line has been growing from the front door of the Bison office of the MPI office all the way out to Bison Drive. There's probably well over 120 people here. There's bleary-eyed teenagers and parents hoping to get some of the coveted spots that are in the Driver's Ed program. This is a condensed version this summer. In each of the courses, there's about 24 spots, and there are about 200 spots available in Winnipeg. And it's like this all over the province. In Brandon, there were 40 people lined up this morning outside of the offices there on Victoria Avenue, some since 8 o'clock last night. They're all hoping to get into these spots. You have to do it in person or by phone. Some are being strategic and going to other offices to line up as well, but they're all hoping to get in to these coveted spots for the Driver's Ed program. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC News.
Thanks so much, Megan. Well, people in Flintflon are on evacuation alert as fire burning in Creighton, Saskatchewan crosses the Manitoba border. The northern city says the wildfire started in a landfill in Creighton. The alert was issued because of dry conditions and the proximity to that fire. In a statement posted on social media last night, Flintflon officials asked people to prepare an emergency kit and to make sure their vehicles are fully fueled and travel ready. 18 active wildfires are burning across Manitoba, according to the most recent report. We are going to hear the latest from the province just after 10 o'clock this morning. Well, 3 years after convicted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky targeted 4 First Nations women, the cousin of one of his victims says there still aren't enough safe spaces for vulnerable women in Winnipeg. CBC's Alana Cole reports.
Hello, someone in here?
Inside a garage, Morgan's Warriors look for anyone who needs help. Melissa Robinson co-founded the outreach group, named for her cousin Morgan Harris, one of convicted killer Jeremy Skibitsky's victims. Robinson wants to see emergency shelters exclusively for women.
Put one in the core area, put one here in the north end, put one, maybe in the West Broadway area, so you kind of have them spaced out.
And Homelessness Winnipeg says there are women-only shelters focusing on people fleeing violence, and several emergency shelters have areas reserved for women. Bernadette Smith is Manitoba's Minister of Housing, Addictions and Homelessness.
We heard loud and clear through our winter response table that included a lot of women that were in encampments, that were living in shelters. They told us loud and clear that they need housing specific for women. So that's exactly what we're doing.
Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Two men convicted of human smuggling in a case where a family of 4 from India died trying to cross the border from Manitoba into the U.S. in 2022 are expected to learn their fates in a Minnesota courthouse today. Steve Shand of Florida and Indian national Harsh Kumar Patel were convicted by a Minnesota jury in November. Prosecutors are asking Shand to get more than 10 years in prison, and they recommend Patel receive a sentence of more than 19 years. Years after investors alleged they defrauded them of tens of thousands of dollars, 2 developers in Toronto will learn their verdict in the criminal trial today. They are accused of misleading investors on 2 projects, including the Sky City condo development here in Winnipeg, which was never built. Details from Lane Harrison.
I was pretty devastated.
After working as a federal employee for nearly 4 decades, Burlington's Linda Bilarosic lost nearly all of her $63,000 in retirement savings in Sky City, a failed condo development in Winnipeg by Fortress Real Developments. Today, the company's principals, Jawad Rathmore and Vince Petroza, will learn the decision in their criminal fraud trial in Toronto, facing charges that carry a maximum sentence of 14 years in prison. Bilarosic hopes it's a guilty judgment.
It's not going to bring back my money, but at least it's some kind of satisfaction that they have to pay for what they did.
At the center of the alleged fraud are syndicated mortgages, where investors lend developers money for a project. Crown prosecutors say investors were told the value of the land was higher than it was, and internal emails show Rathmore and Petroza knew that, while defense lawyers say investors were made aware of the risk and the 2 men never dealt with them directly, relying instead on mortgage brokers. Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
And a legal expert says a ruling in the Peter Nygard case underscores competing interests in the justice system. A judge has ruled there had been political interference by Kelvin Gertsen, the province's Attorney General, in 2022. He asked for a second opinion of an initial decision to not charge Nygard. The review resulted in Nygard being charged with sexual assault and forcible confinement in Manitoba. The judge yesterday did not order a stay of proceedings because of the seriousness of the charges and the public interest in the case. University of Manitoba Associate Professor of Law Brandon Trask says sometimes the goals of the system come into conflict.
Pursuit of the truth is a huge part of the criminal justice system, and ensuring that there's public safety, that concerns that are addressed. That's another massive goal of our system. But all of that also needs to be done in a manner that's fair.
Gertsen has previously said he stands by his decision. You can find more news updated throughout the day. Head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
For a quick look at our regional forecast, here's Abby.
An overview: sun and hazy sky across the southern part of province to smoky conditions up north. It's going to be warm and dry across the province. We do have that special air quality statement in effect across, spreading from Flintflon to Churchill, the Burns River, all the way down to the Upper Main Provincial Park and into the White Shell. Winnipeg at 14 at this time, heading to 27. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region. Brandon is at 8. Dauphin and Gimli both at 13, 14, warming up close to 26, 27 degrees. Up north, we're seeing the par around 17 degrees right now. Thompson, Churchill, 14, both warming up close to 28 degrees today. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at 14. Close to 27 later.
All right, thanks very much, Abby.
Thank you.
Louise Bridge closed till June 1st. St. Vital Bridge closed down to 1 lane in each direction, so you may have challenges there. Also, we just got a reminder from Krista Dubeski, who's up in Thompson, to check 511 for highways because there had been highway closures to Cross Lake and Norway House closed last night, no traffic in or out. We're not sure what that looks like this morning. You're going to want to check 511, and of course, this is due to some of the fires in the north that Heather's been talking about. 788-3093 if you do want to reach Corey with any other issues in the morning commute. 23 minutes now to 8 o'clock on CBC, and up next, the fictional resort town of Waska, Manitoba has a shocking history. Or does it? Cannibalism and queerness intersect in the world premiere of a new play. It questions the stories we tell and the potential harm when rumors are spread. It's called How They'll Tell It. You can catch it at the Gargoyle Theatre in Winnipeg. It starts tomorrow, but we have a bit of a preview today. CBC Manitoba's community reporter, Shanley Vidal, spoke with some of the actors about the meaning behind the play's message.
And Jenny and Sandy come out looking like some kind of horror show.
Well, what happened?
They attack people, bite people or whatever. I mean, it was a big part of the story. It's not an urban legend.
A new play delves into who has the right to tell other people's stories and how speculation can lead to false narratives that can be harmful to others. How They'll Tell It is set decades after two queer women attacked and cannibalized people in a fictional Manitoba resort town.
People said that a group of evil lesbians from the city...
Big city!
...dosed them with LSD like they planned for them to do something crazy.
Callie Spruill is the play's director.
You kind of leap into the story immediately, and you learn that these monster women haunt this town and their stories, and you learn that there's so many different theories, and right away you learn, well, I don't know what's true.
We've a lesbian! Hey, I've never met another lesbian before that I know of. Maybe they're all like that.
We were looking at specifically queer women and cannibalism and how that, and how community reception and this idea of like the monster can play into a story.
Before it's revealed what actually happened, we meet three real estate assistants who are fixing up the town's derelict cabins and sharing gossip.
Did you tell these ones a dumb story too?
I did my duty to share the town's history with my clients, Mark.
My name's Josh Panette, and I'm playing the role of Mark. Mark in this play is one of the only locals of the town.
And the look on their faces was gold. There's a sick stain on the carpet that really sold it.
What was it this time?
Cranberry juice. Now murder? Murder is manageable. Murder's even a little sexy.
It's not murder.
Huh?
They weren't found culpable.
Celia, one of the characters in the scene in the middle there, she's like a famous YouTuber, vlogger, and she comes to this town wanting to get a story, and she kind of is trying to infiltrate this town and take a story off their hands that's maybe not hers to tell or hers to take, and just how this kind of world affects, like this world of influencers and whatnot, affects real people and real lives.
Hey there, morbid ma'ams and misters. My name is Celia, and this is Celia Ray Kills. I've got a special treat for you today.
Because she's sure that there's a new story in there, and there's something that hasn't been told or dug up before. And we learned that not all the locals are so sure, but what's really fun is that we get to see projections. You can't see it right now, but there'll be a little partition in this in the curtains, and Celia will have her YouTube videos up for the audience to see as well and to engage with.
I'm actually in character, undercover. By day, I'm Celia, cleaning abandoned cabins and touring potential tenants, but by night, I'm still Celia Ray Kills, investigating the story of the Waska massacre.
Shanley Vidal, CBC News, Winnipeg.
How They'll Tell It runs tomorrow through June 8th. If you want to catch it, it's at the Gargoyle Theatre in Winnipeg.
A cosmetics empire started by a woman in an era when women couldn't even vote. A family-owned business that has lasted 88 years. And a TV show that broke records.
You fold in the cheese then. Don't you dare. You fold it in.
David!
Terry O'Reilly has a case of brand envy on Under the Influence. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen. CBC Music, live at Massey Hall, the most iconic music venue in Canada. An absolute milestone in the careers of musicians who stand on the historic stage. And you have a front row seat.
All right.
A new season of episodes now available. Bahamas, The Glorious Sons, The Sadies, Field Guide, Serena Ryder, O.C. Elliott, and Chantal Kreviazek. CBC Music, live at Massey Hall. Watch free on CBC Gem.
It is 7:43 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 9:90 a.m. on the app and YouTube. It is 14 in Winnipeg. It's partly cloudy, a little bit hazy out there. We have air quality statements because of the fires affecting Barons River, Flintflon, Thompson, Dooley Lake, Gillam, Shamattawa, Churchill, also Bassett, Victoria Beach, Lac de Bonnie, Pinawa. Lots of problems out there. So here's your overnight update. Just briefly looking at the fires. Nopaming and Bird River still out of control. So is the White Shell Fire in Woboden. Also Cross Lake Fire now listed as out of control. Same with Sheridan, Easterville, and Lynn Lake considered out of control. And Flintflon, as you've been hearing in the news, the city of Flintflon last night issuing a pre-alert evacuation notice. So as of last night, they're just watching what's going on. We will get an update, hopefully from the mayor coming up in the next hour. We'll see if we can get it on the show. We will, though, hear from a resident who said it was a, quote, stressful night, describing the night last night in Flintflon as that wildfire is near the community and you can actually see that orange glow. We're going to talk to her about being on this evacuation alert in case she has to leave. So what's that like being there this morning? So stay tuned. That's coming up after 8 live here on CBC. Well, next on the show, when Lexi Howick gave birth to a healthy baby boy last year, she was, just like with her firstborn, overjoyed. But weeks later, she knew something was wrong. She was anxious, obsessively worried. She was feeling out of control. She also knew that it wasn't postpartum depression, but it was a postpartum mental illness. Now, what's worse, she says she tried to reach out for help. She feared, though, that child welfare officials would get involved. Eventually, Lexi did find the right support. Now that she's strong again, she says, she's advocating for other mothers like her. She's written a powerful opinion piece that you can read right now on cbc.ca/Manitoba's website. And she is here to share her story with us. Lexi is in studio. Hi, good morning.
Hi, morning.
So I want to get right into this and start at the point when you had your baby boy, your most recent baby boy.
Yeah.
What happened? How soon did you start feeling things?
Probably about 2 to 3 months after. I would say in March.
What was it like?
I started just worrying about him a lot, and then it turned into worrying about my own health. And then from there, it turned into panic attacks, which I had never experienced before. And they're frightening.
When you would have them frightening, how? Would your chest tighten or would it physically feel like
I get all different symptoms. Like it would literally feel like I was having a stroke. Sometimes my arms would go numb. Sometimes my heart would beat out of my chest. Can't breathe. Feeling dizzy, out of breath. I would get multiple different symptoms of panic attacks, which can be really frightening. So,
is that sort of what made you feel this wasn't quite a postpartum depression as you would have understood it? Or what was it that made you feel
For
that?
a long time, just because of the obsessiveness, I thought that something was medically wrong. We all knew that nothing was wrong, that I was just panicking, but it was hard to convince myself of that. So I knew it was some kind of mental illness, but I knew it wasn't depression.
What were you most afraid of when you were feeling that way? And then you're also, you have 2 kids.
Losing control. And my kids seeing it too. Also just having to take care of a baby while I was panicking. I feel like I wasn't able to do it, and somehow I still had to do it. So,
what concerns did you have when you first reached out for help? What kind of help were you looking for at first?
When I reached out for help, it was regarding my intrusive thoughts. I was frightened. I was scared. And I was looking for some kind of validation or reassurance from my therapist at the time. And when I did tell her, that's when she threatened to call Child Family Services on me, CFS.
And when you walked away from that, what did that mean for how you felt about reaching out for help?
I thought that if I had ever reached out for help regarding that my kids would be taken away.
So where did you go from there? Because we obviously mentioned you eventually did get help. So you obviously got, I don't want to put words in your mouth, scared or nervous after that sort of threat came?
Yeah. I had to go to my parents that day. Otherwise, she said she would have called CFS. And kind of months went on, maybe a couple months, and I got into July, August, September, and I was still having major panic attacks. I was still having intrusive thoughts. I was obsessing. And I would say at the end of August, I had a really bad panic attack at 4 a.m, and a paramedic came, and she was the one who kind of knelt in front of me and said, it's time to get help. And then when I showed up to the crisis response center, I kind of just let it all go. And I started talking about it all, and I knew I just needed help. I knew I needed to get better.
How surprised were you when the initial person, as you put it, I think your therapist, you said, suggested that your kids could be at risk of being taken away from you?
I felt crazy, and I didn't understand how moms were supposed to get help if they were just threatening to take kids away. And I said to her, I'm like, well, how does that make any sense? If I didn't have a family, if I didn't have support, CFS would just come take my kids because I'm mentally not doing well? And she said, possibly yes. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, that's not right.
Did she tell you what made her suggest that? Like, was it something that was shared that or was it just the thought that you were not able and panicking and not able to take care of the kids?
She said
she thought
it's
you
a
were able to?
a liability for her. Like, I understand why she said it. It's a part of her job description. Intrusive thoughts, right? They happen to everyone. The ones that were scaring me were regarding my children, and because I have OCD, my brain chose to obsess about those ones because it was so close to home. So
I thought I'm as a woman, I'm sitting here thinking I thought we understood more about trying to help women through all these stages without that threat coming to you. How long, you ultimately did end up, I believe, in St. Boniface. You write about this. How long were you there, and what was it that ultimately did help you?
I was there for 2 months. I had a really amazing psychiatrist. They did completely switch my medication. It was a lot of big changes, but it was also exposing myself to my panic attacks. And for OCD, it's also often called exposure therapy. And learning how to sit through those uncomfortable feelings, figuring out different ways to cope. So I would often do the TIP method, which is cold ice on your neck, intensive exercise, tensing your muscles. I would do cold showers, cold plunges. And ultimately, I kind of just learned, that my panic attacks weren't going to kill me and I was in control.
You and I, just so listeners know, I mean, we talked before.
Yeah.
10 years ago, you were a teenager. You and your mom were very open about navigating your journey through the mental health care system then.
Yeah.
And you were advocating then for part of why your family shared was because you were advocating for mental wellness programs for teens.
Yeah.
Today, I mean, this morning, you're advocating for other moms. Tell me a little bit about that, about what you wish that you had and what you think other moms that are struggling in any way with their mental health, deserve in this province.
I think, I had a lot of anxiety through my pregnancy for no particular reason. I just did. And I was educated about postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. I didn't know of any other mental illness. I feel like if I had been educated enough about those different types of mental illnesses, I could have pinpointed what was going wrong. I spent many nights Googling and trying to figure out where I could go in terms of to get help. I knew I needed psychiatric help, but there was nowhere. And then I came across these facilities in the UK that house mothers and their new babies if they have mental illness, and they can still bond with their babies and breastfeed and have that relationship while also working on their. And I just couldn't understand why Manitoba didn't have any of these facilities, because going to get help meant I wasn't going to be able to breastfeed my baby or sleep with him or nurture him or cuddle with him. So it was really, really hard.
You had to be separated to be able to get the help for yourself.
Yeah.
Now, you were never, just so people understand here, you were never diagnosed, I understand. Is that right? With postpartum psychosis or depression?
No,
right?
not till August. I was diagnosed with OCD and
other types of mental illness that still can affect moms.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the whole point here.
Yeah,
I think.
exactly.
Part of it. What difference, as you said, what else do you reflect on when you think about the difference that it would make if Manitoba had a facility like that where you were able to work through things with supports and also with contact with your kids?
I think a lot of kids wouldn't be separated from their parents and their moms, ultimately. I think that if you don't have a lot of support, then CFS often gets involved. And CFS should be a support system, not a threat. And I think a lot of moms, the number one cause of postpartum death is suicide. And I think a lot of moms wouldn't resort to that if we had the supports and the right supports for moms and the right education about it.
What response have you had since writing your piece for CBC Manitoba, and it was posted? I understand you've heard from some people.
Yeah, I've had a lot of moms message me, which has been really nice. One's from the States, one's from across Canada, just sharing their journeys with me. There was a day that I started crying because it was just so... it was nice to hear people's stories, but also incredibly sad to hear the help they didn't receive. I had a 70-year-old woman text me about it, and that was really interesting, like just how far it goes back that women's health has been neglected.
I wonder whether or not it's because, and I'm totally just throwing this out there, but I think about women and mental health, and I also think about the moment of motherhood. And as we know, there's all this pressure to feel a certain way in these moments.
Yeah.
And then when you're struggling, women can project onto themselves that you feel like somehow you have done something wrong, or you failed, or all the messaging can be all these negative things. It's just that woman carrying that for all those years is heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yeah. You were referred to like a baby and me group, is that right? But would that not just be a group where people are, getting together to be moms and be with their babies?
Yeah, it's mostly about child development, I believe. And I did go to one and it was great. But I don't know of any groups that we have for moms where we're just openly talking about mental illness and what we're suffering with. I think I was referred to maybe a postpartum depression group, but again, I didn't have postpartum depression, so that one wasn't meant for me.
It is a tough conversation, especially to go public with it. Why did you decide that you wanted to?
Because I spent many nights looking for other people who had the same story when I was in that place. And I wanted to feel less isolated and less alone with it. I really wanted to find other moms who had gone through the exact same thing I did, or so I could figure out some kind of answer as to what was going on with me. So I just want, if there's another mom Googling or not understanding what's happening, to be able to see my story and say, okay, this happened to her. It's not completely abnormal, Yeah.
You wrote to the premier about it too, right?
Yeah.
What did you say? What did you say to him? What did you ask him?
I told him how much we're lacking in terms of women's health and postpartum mental illness facilities. I said how we should have one, how it should look. I told him a little bit of my story. I actually had wrote it prior to ever being in the hospital because I was so frustrated with the lack of support I was receiving. And then I didn't get a call back till I was actually discharged from the hospital in October.
How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Good?
Yeah.
You want to shout out your kids? How old are they? What are their names?
My son Jaden is 5, and then my son Kyrie is 17 months.
Adorable. You can see pictures of them in Lexi's article on our CBC website. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for being here.
Of course. Thank you.
That's Lexi Huika. She's a Winnipeg mother and mental wellness advocate. If you want to read the story in her own words, as I mentioned, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Tomorrow, we do plan to continue this important conversation. So we have booked something with the Mood Disorders Association Manitoba. That's tomorrow. And I do believe we should go to the UK and find out all about how things work there. I'm Marcy Marcusa. 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. Heather Wells is here with headlines.
People in Flintflon are on evacuation alert as fire burning in Creighton, Saskatchewan has crossed the Manitoba border. The northern city says the wildfire started in a landfill in Creighton, and the alert was issued last night because of dry conditions in the proximity to that fire. The cousin of one of 4 vulnerable First Nations women killed by a convicted serial killer says there still aren't enough safe places for vulnerable women in Winnipeg shelters. Melissa Robinson wants to see emergency shelters exclude exclusively for women in several neighborhoods. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather. We're also actually going to hear more from Alana Cole in a special report after 8 as well here on the show. Also, a stressful night is how a Flintflon resident describes last night as a wildfire nears the community. Heather was just talking about it. We're going to talk to her about what it's like to be on evacuation alert in case she has to leave. So that's all coming up after 8 here on Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and YouTube. Let's look at the weather briefly here. Partly cloudy, 14 in Winnipeg now. Your high 27. It's going to be hazy. Mix of sun and cloud is what's going to be trying to get through that haze. Air quality statements for up around Flintflon, Thompson, Gillam, Churchill, as well in Bissett, Victoria Beach, Lac du Bonnet, and Pinawa area, plus in Barons River and Little Grand and Blood Vein. So be careful with what you're doing, exerting yourself in those smoky areas, and you may want to mask up. Check 511 before you head out. You might see some challenges with the highways and some closures due to fires, especially around Cross Lake. And here in the city of Winnipeg, Louise Bridge closed until June 1st, and Savitel Bridge down to one lane in each direction, which could start to cause backups. 788-3093 is where you can reach us on the traffic and commuter line. Stay tuned. It's 1 minute to 8 and World Report.
Today on Q. The French duo Justice changed the face of electronic music when they released their debut album back in 2007. The two members of the band will be here to talk to you about their latest record and working with The Weeknd, which is different than working for The Weeknd.
Q with Tom Power. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
It came from outer space on board a Chinese space station. Scientists are hoping the discovery of a new bacteria that lives in space can teach us about ways for humans to survive and thrive in extreme conditions. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Indigenous leaders in Yukon say they're concerned. Support appears to be diminishing in the search for unmarked graves near former residential schools. As the ground thaws and the federal government changes, they say they're worried the project will face cuts. As Katrin Pilkington tells us, there's also concern public opinion is turning against them.
They're saying that's false information.
Sandra Johnson is an elder with the Yukon Residential Schools Missing Children Project. She's concerned federal funding cuts and growing residential school denialism will hinder the group's plans this year. Plans that involve ground-penetrating radar searches as well as archival research.
This really did happen, and it's still happening in subtle ways, in different ways. And one of the ways is by cutting out the financial help that we need in order to get this work done.
Over the past year, the federal government has made cuts to organizations that support search efforts. Some Indigenous researchers worry the cuts could fuel denialism. They say they're disturbed by some of the discourse they've seen on social media and heard from Canadian politicians.
It just seems only recently that there's been this enormous pushback.
That's Raymond Frogner, Senior Director of Research with the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation. The TRC has established that thousands died at the schools. Judy Gingell is chair of the Yukon Missing Children Project. She says many parents were never told their children had died or where they were. They just didn't come back in the spring.
A lot of our elders at that time have no idea where the children are passed. So you can imagine the work that we need, the healing.
It's unclear what funding will look like under Prime Minister Mark Carney. The federal government did not return a request for comment by deadline. For Gingell, only one thing is clear.
There's no certainty as to where we're going to go with this project.
Katrin Pilkington, CBC News, Whitehorse.
The challenges before the Canadian government are significant. Mark Carney's plan to address them, now laid out by the speech from the throne, but this time to take action, his time to take action is limited, and the Prime Minister's agenda is packed, starting with a Liberal caucus meeting this morning and his first question period in the House of Commons this afternoon. Let's go to Janice McGregor in our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, Parliament has urgent business it needs to get done. Walk us through it.
That's right, Marcia, because the House hasn't met since December. When MPs reconvened after the throne speech yesterday, the government's spending estimates were immediately tabled. House Leader Stephen McKinnon laid out a plan for debating and then voting to authorize those so federal funding is properly scrutinized again. Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, true to his word, introduced the personal income tax cut that Liberals campaigned on. MPs will vote to authorize that before the summer. But for this first week, the House is going to be debating the priorities that the government laid out in yesterday's throne speech. And surprise, Andrew Scheer, who now serves as opposition leader, wasn't impressed.
It's not good enough to say what you intend to do. You have to provide some kind of a roadmap to get there.
Look, no one expects the Conservatives to support the throne speech when it comes to a vote a week from today. But the Liberals are expected to find the few additional votes they need elsewhere to establish the confidence of the House and then get down to governing again.
So when Mark Carney faces his first question period this afternoon, what will you be looking for?
Well, how this House rookie performs in his debut, of course. But look, some of the most urgent issues he's likely to be grilled on unfold away from Parliament. If you think about the resource development and trade infrastructure demands that he's going to be discussing with the premiers next week, the ongoing tariff talks with Washington, something the government would love to make progress on so it isn't hanging over the G7 summit in Kananaskis in a few short weeks, and the shift to massive defense spending, giving Canada more to show for itself with NATO partners at the end of June. These are all matters that Carney has to nail down elsewhere, then bring back to Parliament to authorize, perhaps in the form of a fall budget.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Janice McGregor reporting from Ottawa. Globally, the last 10 years were the hottest ever measured, and the World Meteorological Organization says the next 5 years could be even hotter. It says there is an 80% chance at least one of the next 5 years will exceed 2024 as the warmest on record. Liz Bentley is the chief executive of the Royal Meteorological Society. She told the BBC the effects could be devastating.
Even with the current warming that we've seen, we're getting more frequent and intense heat waves, more extreme rainfall events, more devastating droughts. We will see all of those being exacerbated as the global temperatures continue to rise.
The annual climate update says there is a 70% chance that, on average, the next 5 years will be warmer by more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. That puts the world dangerously close to breaking the Paris Agreement target. The international agreement aims to limit rising global temperatures caused by the burning of fossil fuels. A longtime fugitive is scheduled to appear in an Ontario court this morning. Patrick Lutz Jr. evaded U.S. authorities for more than 2 decades. A CBC News investigation recently revealed he spent years living out in the open in Toronto. As Thomas Daigle reports, he now faces extradition on charges of manslaughter.
It's been a roller coaster of emotions.
Out of the blue last spring, Jorge Leon says he received an anonymous message that would give hope to his family in Florida for the first time in years.
We're finally getting some type of justice, and it's because of this person.
A tipster claimed they'd tracked down the alleged drunk driver accused of killing Leon's teenage cousin Nancy Lopez and her boyfriend in 1998. Far from the crash site in Orlando, fugitive Patrick Lutz Jr. had been living a double life in Ontario. The tipster said they'd used facial recognition and social media clues to track Lutz to Toronto, handing the details to authorities and leading to Lutz's arrest earlier this year. Alberto Lopez was the victim's older brother.
I was so happy because I was waiting a long time.
Lutz skipped a court hearing more than 21 years ago and vanished. A CBC News investigation found since then he worked as an online psychic and hosted a monthly trivia night at a Toronto bar, all while evading U.S. authorities. Mark Lomax is a former state trooper.
Usually individuals like that will mess up or get into the system way before 21 years.
Nancy Lopez's loved ones say they look forward to seeing Lutz extradited to Florida so they can face him in court. Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
2 men convicted in a human smuggling case are expected to be sentenced in Minnesota today. The case involved the deaths of a family of 4 from India. They were found frozen to death in a Manitoba field in 2022. The family was trying to walk across the border into the U.S. The 2 men were convicted for being a part of a smuggling ring. U.S. prosecutors are asking for nearly 20 years for the alleged leader and 11 years for the driver who was supposed to pick up the family. U.S. embassies around the world have been ordered to stop processing new visas for foreign students. It's part of U.S. President Donald Trump's crackdown on certain universities and colleges. But some critics say it is just another attack on academic freedom. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, what can you tell us?
Yeah, according to diplomatic cables seen by several media outlets here, the order was signed by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio on Tuesday, telling U.S. consulates and embassies to pause all foreign student applications until further guidance. Now, the administration believes foreign students are mostly to blame for the mass protests on university campuses, and it blames the elite liberal universities, especially Harvard, for allowing anti-Semitism to flourish. Now, this order comes days after a judge temporarily paused President Trump's order to block Harvard from accepting international students. Harvard professor Mark Weisskopf says this is an act of retaliation, a personal vendetta by the president.
It literally hurts hundreds of millions of Americans who benefit from serious research in this country and people around the world who benefit from the work that we do.
Now, universities rely heavily on foreign students' tuition for its finances, so this move could have a huge impact on its bottom lines.
Now, another hurdle for international students is this newly proposed plan to screen their social media. What do we know about that?
Yeah, so the State Department could also review the social media history of all foreign student applications. Many State Department officials have reportedly complained privately that the language of what's acceptable of free speech or not is vague at best. One questioned if posting a Palestinian flag on Instagram is grounds for extra scrutiny. So clearly this would have a tremendous impact on universities should this order be enacted permanently.
Thank you, Richard.
Anytime.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on CBC 89.3, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Thanks for being with us on this Wednesday morning where we continue to watch wildfires develop in the province. This half hour, Flintflon residents were told to prepare to evacuate at short notice and be on alert last night as an out-of-control wildfire is burning this morning just outside the city of 5,000 in northern Manitoba. We're going to hear how one resident has been preparing and why she says it was very stressful last night. If you're watching on YouTube this morning, you're seeing images of how the orange glow is looking on the backdrop of the skyline of Flintflon there. So we'll have that interview for you. Also, we're going to hear what Winnipeg shelters have done to enhance security since it came to light that a serial killer targeted women who frequent shelters. Stay tuned for a special report in some more detail from Alana Cole. This is Information Radio. Heather Wells joins us next, though, with other news headlines and developing stories. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the doors are just opening at MPI's office in Bison Drive. A long line of people have been growing there all morning long. Some have been in line since 5 this morning. And that long lineup is for registration for limited spots in MPI's Driver's Ed, a summer's program for driver's education. So we'll take you there coming up. And 2 men convicted of human smuggling in a case where a family of 4 from India died trying to cross the border from Manitoba into the U.S. in 2022 are expected to learn their fates in a Minnesota courthouse today. Steve Shand and Hash Kumar Patel were convicted by a Minnesota jury back in November. Sentencing is today. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Into our weather forecast now and those air quality alert statements from Abby Adiemi.
It's warm and dry across the province, Marcy. We have sunshine in the south and smoky skies skies in the north. However, quality of air is a concern. We have a warning in place for many parts of the province, impacting from Flintflon to Churchill in the north, then Burns River in the central region, and the southeast ports like the Interprovincial Park and into the White Shell. Smoke from the fire is making the air hazy and reducing visibility in this area. And since the winds are light, the weather and also that dry condition we're seeing, it's going to make the smoke hang around for a bit. So if you're in these areas, it's advisable you reduce your outdoor time if smoke affects you. Here in Winnipeg, 14 at this time. Sunny skies, we have a bit of haze in the air. As we get into the day, we're going to see a mix of sun and clouds, and it's going to warm up nicely to 27 with the wind staying light from the north. Across the southern part of the province, Brandon, Duff and Gimli, we're seeing also temperatures close to 18 degrees today. We'll see highs of 25 to 30 degrees across the region. And as we move into the northern part of the province, from the Par, Flintflon and Thompson into Churchill, it's a smoky stats, cloudy conditions we're seeing there. Temperatures at this time hovers between 14 and 17 degrees. It's going to be a bit of mix and sun later in the day, but that smoke will be hanging out for most of the day in that part of the province. We'll see highs close to 30 also up north. But overall, it's warm and hazy across the province.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk is in to update the commute.
Yeah, Jose called the commuter line. There's been a collision on Highway 1 around Green Acres. It's heading into the city. It is causing backup, so keep an eye for that. Other than that, Louise Bridge closed until June 1st. It's been extended a couple times, so heads up there. If you see anything else going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
So thanks to Jose for calling the commuter line. 8:14 is the time right now. Well, just a heads up here, we might get interrupted in this first interview, and it wouldn't be an interruption. We would include the mayor of Flintflon, should he be reaching out to us at this time. We've been trying to get some more information for you about what's happening around Flintflon, because residents are getting ready to leave their homes, just in case they have to at a moment's notice. So as you've been hearing in the news, as of 7:40 last night, the city issued a pre-alert evacuation notice. This is a 1,000-hectare wildfire burning near the city of 5,000, and you can see photos once again, courtesy of Anna Krass on Facebook, and those are up on our YouTube stream. Now, this warned citizens on Facebook last night, quote, "Stay alert and begin planning for a potential evacuation which could occur on short notice should the situation escalate," end quote. As you've been hearing in the news, the fire started just across the Saskatchewan border at a landfill in Creighton. Elsada Alerta lives in Flintflon, and she hasn't gotten much sleep since seeing that pre-evacuation notice. So we're grateful that she's joining us live this morning on CBC. Hi there.
Hi there. Good morning.
So I heard it was really stressful for you last night. Did you, 7:40, they put this out there. When did you hear about it?
Oh, I heard it right away. I've been on top of, any notifications we can get in terms of evacuating. So,
how long you lived in Flintflon?
I've lived here for 3 years. I'm originally from Winnipeg, so this is all new to me. So it's very stressful.
What does it look like and smell like where you are out your window in the city this morning?
Yeah, right now it is very smoky out there. You can still see the fires, the smoke, just outside of the perimeter here of Flintflon.
In some of the pictures, there's an orange glow. Is that something you can see in the city?
We can definitely see it from the city here. Definitely, if you're a little bit high up, you can definitely see it.
What went through your mind then when you saw the notice last night?
Oh, gosh. I was scrambling, definitely, but thankful for my partner to help me. Just thinking of all the necessities that we need and, just make sure to pack it as soon as we can just to get ready to leave whenever they say it's a go.
You ever been through anything like this before?
I have not, no.
Yeah, neither have I. I'm thinking in my head, what would I pack? So what you have, I understand, a child and animals. Yeah. Tell me a bit more about what you put in your go kit.
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, and everything that we need for our child, as well as medications, pet supplies, important documents, passports, and clothing, just all the essential things.
How old is your child? Is it one child?
Yeah, one child. He is 10 years old.
Okay, so you've all the. Yeah. How's he doing with this? Because he's watching you pack and feeling maybe the stress.
Oh, yeah. he was definitely worried as well. And, we did definitely reassure him that everything was going to be okay. So we're just waiting to see if he will be attending school today. So we're not quite sure yet. So we're just waiting for word.
Who are the animals in the house?
I've got my dog Dolly, who's a husky, and 2 cats.
What'd you pack for those guys?
Well, just their food and, of course, litter and, whatever they need for our long trip.
Have you had to think about where you would go if they say, go now?
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking down south in Winnipeg as I have family there. So I definitely have a backup plan.
And would you just make the drive then? I think is it Highway 6? Am I getting it right?
Yeah, Highway 6, or we usually go Highway 10 as well to get to the Highway 6. But yeah.
Oh, that's either an alert or a phone call. If it's urgent, please go. Are you?
Oh. Nope, that's not me.
Okay. Making sure. What's the mood been like in Flintflon in the last 12 hours or so since, the official notice came out?
It's pretty hectic. Like everybody's lining up in the gas stations, getting supplies, and everybody's just on standby.
Yeah. In terms of where people are getting information, how are you receiving that official information from the city about the fires and the situation?
Yeah, it's basically all online, as well as the radio CFAR here in town. The city of Flintflon and Creighton are working together and, reassuring that to notify everybody of evacuation. They're doing such a great job, as well as the firefighters are working tirelessly, doing such a great job here.
Across the province in a lot of the rural areas, the system for actual alerts and evacuation notices, especially if it gets urgent, it's actually left to the RMs to figure out how to roll that out. There's no provincial system. So there's something called this Connect system we're learning about that a lot of people have enrolled in on their phones. Do you guys have that up in Flintflon, or has it been just through your local channels?
No, just through our local channels right now. I'm not aware of that yet, but I'm sure they will come up with some kind of plan here.
So what are you going to do today? Because, here it is 8:19. Is everyone staying home and waiting? Or are you going to go about your day or go out to...
You know what? I am going to go about my day because I do have to go to work at the hospital here. But, we need to still serve our patients here. Once they give us the word, then, of course, we'll take all necessary steps to move forward.
What do you do at the hospital, Alceda?
Oh, I work at the clinic at the Flintflon Hospital. I work as a medical records clerk.
Yeah, okay. Well, good. Thank you for the work that you do in healthcare.
Thank
and good luck today. Hopefully everything will be turn out well. Maybe the winds will shift or calm down, or the firefighters will get ahead of this. So appreciate having you on.
Thank you so much.
That's live with us on CBC. Alceda Alerta. We reached her this morning. She lives in the city of Flintflon. And so if you are just waking, then we have learned overnight that the fire situation there has shifted a little bit and changed. So this was as we've been saying, 7:40 last night. The city issuing a pre-alert evacuation notice to 1,000-hectare wildfire because of burning near the city of about 5,000 people. So we'll see what's happening. It warned citizens on Facebook. The quote was, "Stay alert and begin planning for a potential evacuation," end quote. We do have messages out to speak to Mayor George Fontaine. We just haven't been able yet to coordinate getting him on the air.
Your neighborhood, your community, your country, your world, your news that matters, news that belongs to you. Your World Tonight, every night, 7 days a week on CBC Radio 1, on demand on the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
Next on the show, let's build on something you may have heard Heather mentioning in the news. 3 years after convicted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky murdered 4 vulnerable First Nations women, it is unclear what impact the case has had on safety protocols at some of Winnipeg's biggest shelters. Skibitsky was found guilty last July of 4 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, Rebecca Contois, and Ashley Shingoose. During the trial, court heard that Skibitsky targeted vulnerable women who frequented homeless shelters. CBC wanted to find out whether the case led to changes when it comes to how shelters operate or have their safety protocols changed. CBC's Alana Cole has a special report today.
Hello, someone in here?
Inside this garage, Morgan's warriors look for anyone who might need help.
Well, the stark reality of it was
we're actually checking to see if anybody is in distress.
Or deceased, right? So people are going into spaces like this using, and if they're alone and they overdose, who's going to find them? That's Melissa and George Robinson.
So you're going to come through the back and we'll meet you over here.
Melissa co-founded the group named for her cousin Morgan Harris, one of 4 vulnerable women killed by Jeremy Skibitsky in 2022.
Yeah, we'll go down this side of Main.
Now, the group is dedicated to helping the vulnerable, including those using the city's shelter system. Skibitsky was found guilty of first-degree murder last July for the deaths of Harris, Mercedes Myron, Rebecca Contois, and an unknown victim who has since been identified as Ashley Shingoose. During the trial, court heard Skibitsky targeted vulnerable women who frequented homeless shelters. He told police he first met Harris at a shelter and met Myron and Shingoose in the areas near them. Skibitsky said he used shelters for meals. In court, a shelter worker testified Skibitsky once told him he had his own place, he was just there to stalk his victims.
You know, we don't judge anyone. We don't know their backstory.
While May marks 1 year since the start of Skibitsky's trial, Melissa says there still aren't enough safe places for vulnerable women. She wants to see emergency shelters in several neighborhoods exclusively for women. I feel like my cousin may still be around, right now, if that option was there. She was preyed upon. Those other women were preyed upon. How many more men out there are thinking that same thing? Hearing in court, Skibitsky targeted vulnerable women. CBC wanted to find out whether or not this case has led to any changes when it comes to how shelters operate or safety protocols. Now, I reached out to Siloam Mission, the Salvation Army, Main Street Project, and Nadina Waymack, our relative's place. Only Nadina Waymac's executive director, Frank Parks, met me for an interview.
It'll be a difficult subject for a long time for our community to speak about, because we still, are dealing every day with the tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
Nadina Waymack started as a pop-up shelter with several partners running it. Video evidence from 2022 inside 190 Disraeli shows Harris with Skibitsky. It was here Skibitsky made that chilling comment to a worker. Parks took on his role less than 2 years ago. He says now it's one organization, which helps streamline communication.
We can communicate from somebody who sees a problem, on out in the common space, and then get that information up into leadership and people that can actually act on that information and investigate it and report it. So that has changed for sure.
He says the Indigenous-led shelter works to hire Indigenous people and those with lived experience, giving them a deep understanding of the national crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls.
We kind of internalize it here because of our beliefs and our backgrounds and our shared experiences, and so we're well aware that there are predators out there, and there are people that are exploiting women and girls.
A provincial spokesperson says the province increased funding rates for shelters, transitional housing services, and homeless outreach mentors in October 2022. Adding the increase included a 15% top-up for safety and security measures. As for the other 3 shelters I reached out to, well, they wouldn't do an interview. I received a statement from shelter providers through End Homelessness Winnipeg. It says in part that because of the sensitive nature of shelter operations, they can't talk about specific security measures, but say they regularly review, update, and strengthen protocols. And in recent years, have improved coordination among shelters, and many shelters have enhanced gender-specific accommodations. We took our questions to Manitoba's Minister of Housing, Addictions and Homelessness. She says her office is focused on getting people into housing with wraparound supports. Bernadette Smith says there are housing units earmarked for women.
We know that homelessness is a real
challenge for a lot of folks in this province, and it puts them at a disadvantage, as we've, discovered with a lot of folks who are in shelter. They're unsafe at times.
As for Morgan's Warriors, their outreach work continues.
This is all about my cousin. This is about, her memory, her life, and, to give her that love.
So that helping other vulnerable women is now part of Morgan Harris's story. Alana Cole, CBC News, Winnipeg.
So that was Alana Cole with a special report. At a news conference earlier this month, in addition to the report here, Families Minister Nahanni Fontaine announced a new specialized team that will work with the Downtown Community Safety Partnership to help meet the needs of Indigenous women and girls. Fontaine said it is part of a 4-year MMIW-G2S Plus provincial strategy. It is now 8:28 a.m. and let's briefly turn to Marjorie Dalhouse, who's popped in about Radio Noon in the Call-In. What are you looking at today?
Well, I don't know much about AI. All I know is that it exists, and I know a lot of people have questions around it. We now have a new Minister of Artificial Intelligence, as we heard Prime Minister Carney announce his cabinet there. So what is AI? I mean, a lot of people have questions about it. It can be for good, it can be for bad, but if you have any burning questions about artificial intelligence, bring them on to Radio Noon after 12:30. David Gerhardt from the University of Manitoba will join me to answer your questions about all things AI. I call it Artificial Intelligence 101.
All right. I like it. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
Well, I'm going to something completely different from AI. Like, couldn't be more different. We're talking about really the hard stuff, the concrete stuff, the stuff you can touch. Talking about the roads, the infrastructure. We had an interview with the author of a book called You'll Pay for This. It's all about city finances, and not just Winnipeg, although Winnipeg is the case study in this book, but it's any city. So we asked you for a chance to win the book. What would you spend money on in the city if you could improve Winnipeg? Well, we got some response from Brandon. Erin Jane wrote in, I'm from Brandon, so I'm going to answer that in regards to my city. Thank you. I would spend money on an outdoor water park for the city. You've got nothing like this. Linda Cole said, prioritize places for kids and families. I work with youth, and in Winnipeg, I've heard their voices and their needs for, quote, something to do, and those calls must be heeded. Christian Jimmy said, I'd spend it on protected bike lanes. Diana Raising wrote in, if I could, I would put more money towards city beautification, which includes garbage and street cleanup. We have to have more pride in the city. I see beauty on every street, but we need a facelift. And finally, Tamara Petkow writing into win at cbc.ca. I'd use money to invest in bike infrastructure and make it the best in the world, and invest in downtown so that urban sprawl doesn't continue to grow. So those are some of the comments coming in at win at cbc.ca to try and win the book. We will close this out right now because we're coming up to 8:30 exactly, and we'll make a random draw of the winners. We're going to go to the news unless, Corey, you have something urgent to report?
Yeah, highway number 1 completely blocked right now, right outside of Tinkertown going westbound, Jose said. So if you're coming in, said the best bet is to take the perimeter. There was a multi-vehicle collision there, firefighters on scene. So avoid number 1 westbound just outside of Tinkertown.
Okay, important update. Thank you.
Thank you.
And your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's 16 degrees and sunny, headed to a high today of 27, and again, another hazy day. Well, people have been lining up at MPI offices in Winnipeg and in Brandon, all hoping to snag limited spots in the driver education summer program. CBC reporter Megan Ketchison is at the lineup on Bison Drive. Megan?
Well, at one point, this lineup was about all the way back to Bison Drive and wrapping around the corner, probably close to 200 people. The first people were here in line at about 5:15. The doors opened at 8, allowing people in for limited spots. They were letting in 5 people at a time, and you can only register for these limited classes either by phone or online. So the lineups, there was people lined up. There were 40 people deep in Brandon, and some of those people had been lined up since 8 o'clock last night. Now, from what I've been told by MPI, they were anticipating this kind of demand. That's why they added these condensed MPI, or these driver's ed classes, because they know that there's the demand there. They said that they are limited because of the number of driving instructors that they have. And so there are 384 spots for the 2 summer programs in Winnipeg and 204 in the rest of the province. That's about 588 in total. That's up from the 312 that they they usually have during the summer. So the lineup continues on. They're hoping to get in as many as possible, but there's a lot of people that are going to be walking away from this line disappointed. Reporting live, Megan Ketchison, CBC News.
Thanks so much, Megan. Well, these are stressful times for people in Flintflon. The city of just over 5,000 is on evacuation alert as a fire burning in Creighton, Saskatchewan has crossed the Manitoba border. Alceda Alerta got the news last night.
You have to get everything done last minute and scrambling around, especially with, a young child. It's very hard, and some animals here as well. So it's definitely stressful.
In a statement posted on social media last night, Flintflon officials asked people to prepare an emergency kit and make sure their vehicles are fully fueled and travel ready. 18 active wildfires are burning across Manitoba, and we are going to hear the latest from the province on the wildfire situation just after 10 o'clock this morning. The cousin of one of 4 vulnerable First Nations women killed by convicted serial killer Jeremy Skibitsky says there still aren't enough safe spaces for vulnerable women. Melissa Robinson co-founded Morgan's Warriors, named for her cousin, Morgan Harris. The outreach group is dedicated to helping vulnerable people, including those using the city's shelter system. She wants to see emergency shelters exclusively for women in several neighborhoods.
I feel like my cousin may still be around, right now, if that option was there. She was preyed upon. Those other women were preyed upon.
And Homelessness Winnipeg says there are women-only shelters focusing on the safety and support for those fleeing violence, and says a number of emergency shelters have designated areas within their facilities reserved for women. 2 men convicted of human smuggling in a case where a family of 4 from India died trying to cross the border from Manitoba into the U.S. in 2022 are expected to learn their fates in a Minnesota courthouse today. Steve Shand of Florida and Indian national Harshkumar Patel were convicted by a Minnesota jury in November. Prosecutors are asking Shand to get more than 10 years in prison, and they recommend Patel receive a sentence of more than 19 years. Well, years after investors alleged they were defrauded of tens of thousands of dollars, 2 developers in Toronto learned the verdicts in their criminal trial today. They're accused of misleading investors on 2 projects, including the Sky City condo development in Winnipeg, which was never built. Details from Lane Harrison.
I was pretty devastated.
After working as a federal employee for nearly 4 decades, Burlington's Linda Bilarosic lost nearly all of her $63,000 in retirement savings in Sky City, a failed condo development in Winnipeg by Fortress Real Developments. Today, the company's principals, Jawad Rathmore and Vince Petroza, will learn the decision in their criminal fraud trial in Toronto, facing charges that carry a maximum sentence of 14 years in prison. Bilarosic hopes it's a guilty judgment.
It's not going to bring back my money, but at least it's some kind of satisfaction that they have to pay for what they did.
At the center of the alleged fraud are syndicated mortgages, where investors lend developers money for a project. Crown prosecutors say investors were told the value of the land was higher than it was, and internal emails show Rathmore and Petroza knew that, while defense lawyers say investors were made aware of the risk and the 2 men never dealt with them directly, relying instead on mortgage brokers. Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
And the Weather Network is out with its long-range summer forecast. Across most regions of Canada, we're being told to expect plenty of sun and hot temperatures, and that means drought and wildfire concerns primarily across the southern prairies. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Exactly what we don't need. All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Quick thank yous here to the people who worked in the program. Our associate producers, Jenna Badosso, Donna Carrero was a producer, as well as Sierra Sanders, who directed the program and also wrote for the show today. Community reporter Shanley Vidal, reporter Alana Cole, our news department, Heather Wells, Joni Nicolo, and Megan Ketchison. Our live team, Abby Adiemi, Sierra Sanders, Brad Lillies, as well as Corey Funk, who's here with a quick last look at traffic.
Highway 1 westbound, just outside of Tinkertown, there's a multi-vehicle collision that has a completely blocked fire trucks on scene, says Jose. You're going to want to find another way to get around, particularly if you're coming in, maybe take the perimeter to get around, because that's the only way you're going to get anywhere.
All right, thanks very much, Corey. And Abby.
A warm, hazy day across the province. We're going to see highs close to 30, but there's smoke in the air in the northern part of the province.
All right, thank you very much, Abby. Well, be well, everyone. Of course, more on Radio Noon about the fires and their call-in about AI, and more on CBC Through the Day. Anytime. And you want to reach out? Reach out. Take care, be well, stay safe. I'm Marcy Marcusa.